opportunity to begin to meet one another and talk about this important endeavor. You catch us at a very interesting time at Jackson State in two ways. One, the obvious way, which is that we are deciding to reconstruct the what is now the Department of Mass Comm into a school of journalism and communications in order to address a lot of the issues that are in the marketplace today. But the other sort of overarching concern that I want to at least put on the table is the assault on the humanities. This is a time when state budgets and universities are not supporting the humanities in the ways that they used to. And when I say the humanities, I'm really talking about the core curriculum that most of us who went to college, most of our college educations, I don't know, some of you are kind of young, I don't know, but most of us went to school at the time when the core curriculum was the core, and then you took your major classes after that, but there was an understanding that the core skills you would develop would be writing, reading, speaking, reasoning. And now with the advance of STEM, and STEM is all that anybody wants to talk about, and that's where all the money is, then the humanities or the liberal arts have sort of fallen by the wayside. We're finding it more and more difficult to cover the kinds of classes that we need because we don't have the funding really to hire full-time tenure-track faculty. Much of these courses are taught by adjuncts who sometimes are fired at the last minute because of what the size of the classes are. Because all the emphasis is going into specific curricula in mostly STEM fields or in fields that lead directly to careers. Well, as people who are largely in journalism, you know how crucial it is for people to be able to communicate, and communication being the centerpiece of any education, I would argue, though I might be losing that argument. We find that students are coming in with very poor writing skills, frequently poor communication skills. They're used to interfacing with people through screens and not directly. You'll find students walking down the sidewalk together, not speaking to one another, but in their phones. And so the whole sort of communication process has begun to erode. The trick then becomes, what do you do about that when you get them in a classroom? It doesn't change automatically when you get them into a classroom. If they come to you with poor basic skills. Well, that's also about an assault on secondary education, right? So the haves have good secondary educations in many cases, but that doesn't mean they have those core skills. And then those who are sort of confined to public schools frequently will come to college without even the basic rudiments of what it takes to communicate in writing or even speaking. So the problem is actually larger than this department. I don't want to say the problem, it's very negative. The concern is larger than this department, but the concern is crucial about how we build a department based on these sort of larger issues that are challenging us in the classroom, struggling so hard to keep it positive. We find also that students are less likely to be committed. Well, let me start over. I'm sure that you all know a lot about the millennials. And our students are less like, I mean our students at Jackson State, I mean 2014 college students, are certainly less likely to be deeply enmeshed in their studies. Frequently, you only get from them whatever it is you get, what you get in class. Okay, they may not do, you know, the metric is that you would spend an hour for every hour, an hour outside of class for every credit hour you spend in class. But it doesn't work that way. Frequently, the only time that they will engage whatever it is that you're doing is when you are actually in the class. It's very difficult to get them to read supplemental things. It's difficult to get them to do homework. They just stay out. What you gonna do? You know. And as we move, and there's a larger conundrum to that, because as we move into a market economy for education, there was a time when education was sort of the cultural benchmark, and you pledged to get in. And you recognized that your instructors were the wellspring of knowledge, and you went to them and they poured from the fountain into your cup. And you did what you needed to do to prove that you were an educated person and that you deserved the chances in life that that education would afford. Now, there's a whole different academic culture that sells seats to anybody who can get a loan. Okay? Now, I might have said that in a negative way. Let me go back. It's called access. Okay, now more and more people have access to higher education. And so we are much more likely to get a wide array of students who have varying kinds of basic skills to come into the classroom in the first place, right? Because it's all about getting more bodies into seats. I would say there's a moral dilemma to that, because while we're getting bodies into seats, we are less concerned about what they brought to the seat before they got there and whether that will allow them to prosper. Because we are now, again, I don't mean Jackson State, I'm talking about just universities. Because we are now challenged by every sort of interface for education, online education, distance learning, for-profit schools, every strip mall has some kind of college you've never heard of before coming up, that our agenda has changed for how we interact with students. And so student success and student persistence is the hallmark of the day. In just a minute, in just a Scotia bit, we are going to go, I don't know if you know the term, for those of you who are academics, FTEs, that's how many contact hours you have with students. FTEs for the longest time has dictated where the money goes. Okay, so the departments and programs that get money have to do with how many contact hours we have with students. In just a minute, I mean, literally, we're going to go not from FTEs, but for graduation rates. Because what has happened is that the more students we put into the pipeline, they're going into the pipeline, they're getting state and federal money to go to school, and they're not coming out the other side. Many of them enroll, get the loan, get the check, we never see them again. We go buy rims. Okay? And so after the housing bubble burst and the funding to higher ed kind of fell apart, there was more conscientiousness and also to continue to create an elite society that's not based now on who's in college, like it used to be. Now it's about who finishes college. There's 100 reasons why people don't finish college. 100. And so the money is, in just a minute, going to go to who actually finishes and gets that degree on the stage, and not how many people are sitting in your classroom at any one time. So just give you a sort of shift in the landscape, I've been teaching in higher ed for 25 years. Please don't do math on that. I'm trying to figure out what that means. For 25 years, and when I first started in English, I was teaching composition. I would have maybe 25 students in the classroom, and I'd be ripping out my hair. I'm like, how do you expect me to teach composition to 25 people at one time? Now you may have 40 people in your classroom. What kind of attention can you give people, 40 people at a time? And you're trying to make, have that hands-on, which people will argue is what it takes to really teach writing. Now you might be able to teach some other things in large format, but it becomes much more difficult. Well, hear what I'm saying about this. You may end up with 45 people in your classroom that you have to serve, but it only matters how many of those 45 graduate. You still with me? Now think of what the pressures are, the unspoken pressures are, to let folk out whether they can write or not. The other thing that has happened is that we are now getting serious pressure about student satisfaction. When you can go anywhere to college, and a lot of places for less, then you can't harass your students and say, I said come on time and fill the paper up with red ink and talk about their mamas. You can't do that anymore. People try. And so the problem is, how do you jibe all of these necessities? How do you get more people in the seat? How do you get them through? How do you inculcate them with the basic skills? And then how do you make sure that they're not pressured? They don't like pressure. The millennials don't appreciate pressure. And they are quick to complain. And oh, by the way, they don't complain to the teacher, they don't complain to the chair, they don't complain to the dean, they do complain to the dean. They go straight to the president. Straight to the president. Can you imagine having gone to the president of the university? Not these, but yes, yes. Can you imagine having gone to the president of the university to say that your English teacher was being mean to you when you were in college? Okay, that's a thing now. So we have a lot of things that we have to bring to bear when we're thinking about how we're going to create these curricula. How do you bring people in? How do you make them successful? How do you teach them when they have these flagging skills that they come with, and yet have them come out the other end so that they're successful and can participate in the industry? You know better than I what that industry demands, but I can tell you this. Whatever the industry demands, we were not prepared for that before. We were still prepping students for the 20th century. We were prepping students to write for newspapers, which seem to be disappearing every day you look up, into another format. I mean, paper newspapers, right? And so, and if you are familiar, and I know Pearl has been an academic, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves after my scintillating introduction, but I'm not sure how many of you are academics. Lord,
as opposed to practitioners, to journalists.
Yeah.
and that thought is gone. Never to return. But something about being an academic. That's the 25 years. That's why. I'll come back to that. We have to figure out how we are going to reshape this curriculum in such a way that our students in Jackson, Mississippi, not only can come in, get through, get out, but they fill some sort of niche that will allow them to be productive in this area. Our students are far less likely than any place I've been to leave the nest. People love Mississippi. They don't want to even go for a study abroad or away for a semester. So we are, for the most part, not only, but for the most part, prepping students to stay right here. And so we have to think about what the needs are right here that they will be able to fill. Because if they can't finish and get employed, because that's going to be the next thing, that's going to be the next metric after we go through completion rates, is are people able to be employed when they finish your schools, which is actually what's making how we are challenged in for-profit schools. Mm-hmm. People going through the for-profit schools with the promise that they will have employment and they don't. That we are able to get them to find jobs in this area that's lucrative and useful to the community as well. So those are the things that we're up against. The interesting thing for me is I've been here less than a year. Well, no, I've been here just a year. I just had an anniversary. I came in as associate dean and was appointed interim dean in June. And the department, which Eric will tell you about shortly, has been very unstable heretofore. I believe there have been maybe 4 or 5 chairs in the last 5 or 6 years. There's a lot of trouble with that. And so trying to figure out how to stabilize that, how to stabilize the leadership and the direction. Actually, it's very lucky that we're able to make all these changes at once. So Eric stepped in as interim chair, which has been a blessing in every sense of that word. I thank you for that. He as a professional and as an academic, knows how to shape the direction that we take going forward. We have 3 tenure track positions open right now that are being posted, and we have 2 in the pipeline that will come up next year. That's 5 faculty. That almost never happens. I can't even imagine when you would get 5 new faculty positions at one time. Usually you have to wait for people to die to get a faculty line, right? And they never die. So this is an amazing opportunity to completely overhaul this department and make it into something amazing. even the director of the department does not have to be an academic in this case, which I think is to our advantage. And that's one of the things I know we want to talk about today, the sort of distinction, or not the distinction, but what do you get when you have an academic, when you have a practitioner? You know, there are advantages and liabilities to both. One of the liabilities is if you have a practitioner and they don't know about the morass of the bureaucracy in higher ed, they could end up shooting themselves in the office. Okay, and then if you get an academic versus a practitioner, they can get so mired down in the morass that you don't have the sort of cutting edge sensibilities that you might have, because they do understand all of those bureaucratic structures. So these are the kinds of things that we want to talk about today. We want to be daring. We want, and I think you all are daring from what I heard last night. We want to, as they say in the hackneyed phrase, think outside the box. We want to do something big and bold. And later today, at lunchtime, let me back up that sentence. Originally, we were scheduled to meet in Innovate, which is our new state-of-the-art digital ecosystem, belly of the ecosystem. We have an amazing technology resources here at Jackson State. And when we moved the date, we lost the room. But we are happy always to have you come to the Martin Walker Center. And so today I want us to go, it's not on your schedule, but I want us to have the tour of that site, because it'll show you just how fast forward we are. We are way ahead in some respects of a lot of places, because we are, as they say, a digital ecosystem. And we have an ad in the article, don't we, that says just that. Our technology, our students now have textbooks that are digital, loaded in their iPads. They can do their homework, their assessments. Everything goes into the iPad, so it's our way of not only controlling assessment, which is crucial, but also to bring down the cost of textbooks. Textbooks are prohibitively expensive now. You're going to spend well over $100 per textbook. Well over. You know, so by the time you have a semester, a student may spend well over $1,000, $1,500 in books. And guess what? They're not doing it. They're not going to spend that, because that interferes with the cell phone and the nails. And they're not going to compromise those nails or hair. Okay? And so what they do is they don't buy the books. So now you have people who aren't doing the homework, who are sitting there looking at you like this, who didn't do the reading because they didn't have the book. So what we have done is to go in and redesign these books so that they cost $10. They are also entrepreneurial, because the people who produce the books get 70% of that cost. So $7 goes back to the department, to the person, or the department, I guess. We say the person, but we probably need the department that generated those books, and then the rest goes to just sort of the expense of operating them. So it gives us there's a real reason to develop these books, and also because they're digital, you can change them, update them very quickly, very easily. Traditional textbooks get old and useless in a matter of minutes. You start using it, you're like, this doesn't do what I thought it was going to do. And you're stuck with it, because there's usually a textbook policy that says you have to keep it for X amount of time so that people can resell it and get the money's worth. So the technology interface puts us way ahead of the game, and particularly because technology plays such a high role in what we're doing. So I really want you to see that facility today, and I think you're going to be impressed, I hope, and amazed. In fact, on Monday, we just had the ceremony. We've been taking credit for this for some time, but we just had the ceremony that designated us an Apple Distinguished University, one of 5 in the nation, and the only HBCU. So we are very, very proud of that. So that's the head of the dog. I couldn't think of another animal. The tail is no technology, no, in other words, the whole school is not on the same page with that. But we are trying to make sure that the College of Liberal Arts is, because we represent the bulk of the Gen Ed core. There are 3 other classes outside of us. It's computer science, biology, and math. But every other thing, including the electives, are in our college. So we're trying to get there first, engage this technology, save students money, engage them in ways that traditional textbooks and classroom interactions do not. And so all of that at once sets the stage for this amazing program that we're going to put together in this room, that we are only limited in terms of what this becomes by our imaginations. That's it. And maybe some money. Let's not let that bother us. So I turn this over to my capable partner in crime over there, Mr. Stringfellow. It's on you.
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. Good morning.
Morning.
And I'm going to stand if that's okay. First, I got to tell you again just how thankful I am to have you guys here, and just to commit to the time. I do think it's important that everybody understand who's in the room. Okay? And so I'm going to let you go around and introduce yourself and say what you're doing. And I'm going to probably come back with some editorial content, comment about you and why you're here. Because, and I'll be honest too, that in terms of what Dr. Barnes was saying about the practitioners versus the scholars, okay, this discussion is weighted heavily toward the practitioners, okay. There are not a lot of scholars here, and that's okay. I mean, we're going to, the scholars have to be a part of the conversation. We're talking about shaping an academic department, okay? But quite frankly, that's not what I wanted to do today, okay? I wanted to bring some people who are out there on the battlefield, who can come and tell us what's happening out there, what's going on, who can give us some graphic descriptions of this massive shift that's going on. Then come back and tell us from your perspective what we ought to be doing about it at Jackson State. Okay? And so with that, I'm going to start with the distinguished Pearl Stewart. just a little bit about yourself, and just because again, this is and then again, Jim Martin is right. If you guys have missed dinner last night, you really missed a great conversation. Okay? And so this is wide ranging. This is a distinguished group. Okay, I want everybody to understand that. So,
Okay, starting with me. Well, I'm Pearl Stewart, and I live here in Jackson now. I retired from both daily journalism and teaching. I was an academic for a while as well, but I retired a few years ago and moved to Jackson because my parents, I had family here. Both my parents have passed, but I came here while they were in their later years. And some of you know them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I am one of the rare breed, I guess, of the combination. I'm a combo, I guess, of someone who worked professionally in journalism for many years. I'll just say more than 20. Leave it at that. And after leaving well, I was at the San Francisco Chronicle as a reporter for 12 years. I worked as a reporter and editor at the Oakland Tribune and became editor of the Oakland Tribune, and I know you're going to let them know what the first
it had my
following in the footsteps of the great Bob Maynard that many of you are familiar with as well, who passed on years ago. After I left journalism, I did go into teaching. Fortunately, I do not have a PhD, but I have a master's degree, and I was able to do some teaching at Florida A&M mainly for 5 years. I did a stint at my alma mater at Howard with a grant from the Knight Foundation for a year there as a journalist in residence. And I did a brief stint here at Jackson State. When I left as editor of the Oakland Tribune, I came here for like a semester, 2 semesters.
the spring semester. I think
And the summer, I think maybe 2 before, I left to take the grant at Howard. But I did spend a little time here as well. And as I mentioned, Florida A&M, a little bit at Xavier too. So I've been around in both the profession of journalism and in academia. And so I hope that I can offer some of that here in helping you.
The editorial kind of about Pearl is, she's a talented writer and editor. She's the first African American female to edit a major metropolitan area in the U.S.
You're not supposed to leave that out, sir.
I touched on it.
It's better from the third party.
Maybe you have to introduce everybody.
Okay, thank you for
Sure.
Hi, good morning. Alice Tisdale, publisher / floor sweeper, an advocate. Been there 34 years in different capacities. I'm a publisher now by default. I lost my husband in 2007, the great late Charles Tisdale. And I've seen a lot in those 34 years as far as being in the black press. We have a network of 200 newspapers across the country. Jackson Advocate is a founding member of NNPA. The late Percy Green was the initiator of NNPA, the network for all black publishers across the country. Just have seen a lot, want to do a lot more. Open to Jackson State is my love. Chigaloo to do a lot of work with them as well. But we're here for the community. We're the trusted voice. Pretty much they go by what we say, but we need people to embrace us more so that we know they can write intelligently. Because if you don't know the issues, I'm like, oh, now I know Chris could have told me this story, you know. So it's like, you know, you want to make sure that people are utilizing what you can do for the community. So just go ahead.
Thank you, Allison. The editorial panel about her is everywhere with her team. Charles Tisdale was this great. He and I probably never agreed on anything. But he had this baritone voice, quoted Machiavelli, Nietzsche. And when people, I wrote a column saying that, I was debating about whether or not to name the library after Charles Tisdale. And I said that would be perfect because he read everything. And so, but that is a lot of history, and I really, really appreciate what you're doing again. This is everybody in communication mind needs to be here. So I think that with the African's history, again, thank you for taking the time out to come and be a part of this discussion.
And they did name the library.
Because of my time.
Because
My name is Chaucer Burns. I am currently I'm an agency guy that became a marketing guy. I've worked in media on the buying side, on the sales narrative side, digital strategy, creation, and basically I've kind of made a career of creating, commissioning, and brokering content on behalf of brands that inspire people to choose this, not that, drink this, not that, wear this, not that. Whereas Round Me Up is a company called West, for which I work now. West's entire idea is to intersect with early to mid-stage technology companies, help them stand up in the world. So that means a couple of different things. Number one, market creation, which is advertising, marketing, PR, all of the things that you need to stand up in the world and be known. Another is design, organization design. So staffing for generally the future. These are companies that are VC backed, and so they're expected to explode at 10x, 100x kind of multiples. And as a result, because they're going to grow this way, we have a fair degree of kind of forecasting and marketplace intelligence that we try to bring to bear for these other companies, and we provide real capital as well to meet milestones. And so what I hope that licenses me to bring to this conversation, because we work across media, physical products, software, companies that are in the B2B space, B2C space, all of whom are leveraging the media marketplace for different reasons and in different ways, is a bit of a real-time practitioner who can see from the publisher standpoint, the advertiser standpoint, the consumer standpoint, what all this looks like and kind of where it's headed.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Barnes. Again, editor copy. I just met Mr. Barnes this morning, but he's here because his mother told me about her son and what he did, and I insisted that you be a part of this conversation. I insisted.
That's why I was up making biscuits.
Okay. Good, thanks a lot. I know you had a hard time getting here, so man, thanks a lot for being here. Your perspective, you really need to be a part of the conversation.
Name, rank, serial number, Philip Morris. I've spent 90% of my career in Cleveland at the Plain Dealer as an editorial writer, and most recently as a columnist. As such, I've had the pleasure to meet three of the men around this table: Sekou, who I met as an intern, Terrence, and of course Eric. When my editor found out that I was coming to meet with you folks, he started laughing. I'm being dragged literally into the digital age. I'm a dinosaur.
You appreciate it, take it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my immediate editor considers me a disgruntled diva. I refuse to hyperlink my columns. I won't embed photos, and I basically dared them to fire me. And I'm still not sure why I'm there. But this conversation right here is so important to me because I was ready to walk away from journalism a couple of years ago. But I decided to stay because I understand the role that we play and the role that we need to continue to play. So when Eric told me that Jackson State wanted to have this conversation, it really lit a fire into me that I hadn't felt in some time. So I'm happy to be here.
Okay, and to talk about Phil, a lot of his personal is, Phil's my guy. We spent a lot of time in Cleveland together. We were young. We were one of the smartest, most talented writers that I've ever seen. And his perspective as a self-acknowledged dinosaur also needs to be a part of this conversation as well. Okay. Heard from Jay Barnes.
Deborah.
Well, good morning. I'm Oakland Payne. I guess I'll start by saying I hate I missed dinner last night. We've heard some varying conversations. Recapped anyway. I guess I will say that I've done about 25, 30 years in radio, TV, and I'll let you figure those calculations out. I did a stint here at Jackson State, served as news director at WGSU and an anchor at TV 23 when it was called TV 23 then. I am the former managing editor for the Mississippi Link newspaper, which is also an African-American weekly newspaper. I started as a freelance journalist there and worked my way up. Former blogger, a really good blog at one time that actually turned into something that I wasn't expecting. It became a place where law enforcement people would come and gripe and do that, so I ended up shutting it down as a result of that. And ironically, I serve right now as the Director of Media and Communications for the Hyde County Sheriff's Office. And imagine that, right? So I'm excited to be here. I think this is forward-thinking. I think the students that have an opportunity to go to Jackson State, I think this will be most beneficial. I'm excited because Jackson State has all of the platforms. I've said that for many, many years. The blue and white flash, the radio station, the TV station. Students have every single thing they need on this campus to succeed. So I'm excited to participate in the conversation.
Okay, and you can tell both has got great and all of that, I mean, when you think about one question I actually about was business and entrepreneurship and all the stuff that Opie has done in journalism, public relations. I think he probably got it started in radio and others got to follow. Okay, so definitely want to pick his brain about how you've done that and knows this market, knows the university. So again, just your perspective, and just kind of I said hustler for lack of a better word, in some sense I think needs to be a part of this discussion. Pick one. The platform thing was a student, I was speaking to a class yesterday, it's like, wow, you can, smart person can walk out there today with the mobile apps and the internet, and you're savvy enough, you can build you an audience. But the question becomes, how do you monetize it? How do you monetize it? So again, welcome. Ms. Jackson.
I'm Bonnie Jackson. Good morning. I'm 95% academician and 5% practitioner. This is my second stint at Jackson State, so I'm a visiting professor here now. I came in the early 80s when the push was on accreditation. I came from Tougaloo College, my alma mater, one of them, when the push was on trying to do journalism as part of English. I'm really interested now and I'm really excited about being back now because we've always fought the battle of how much practitioner and how much academician. And I think we've missed the boat because we didn't realize that you got to marry both. They have to have some people say unholy alliance, I say the holiest of alliances, is that you got to bring students in, and in this day and age, you have got to get them doing it. They cannot sit in the desk anymore. Because I look at them now, and they got the technology now in their hands. So I'm really excited about seeing how we can transform education. We've been talking about it for a long time. And I think now the schools who transform education into doing, into hands-on, I don't think you have to, and I'm editorializing a little bit, but I don't think you have to lessen one at the extent of the other. I think they both carry the weight. I think that a student that knows about Russell and knows about the Freedom Journal is a student who now can do what Gutenberg did. I see it as cyclical. I don't see it as linear. I see it that students now can start their own. I have a couple of students who already have their own blogs. And so I can't stand up anymore and pontificate about, all of the different newspapers and all of the different television stations and all of that. Students want to put hands on, and I think Jackson State is really at a great place now. I'm really excited if we can talk about classes that encourage students to do both. Finally, I just came from a very small town newspaper in my hometown where I had the vaunted title of the news editor. I did it all. I did everything, and I loved that because I was out in the community, but I was taking pictures. I had to come back and write for online. I had to cover the election late at night and put it online and then get ready for the weekly newspaper in the morning to do it. So there just are a lot of opportunities out there for the people who aren't scared to go out and take them. And we need to train students not to be scared of the new frontier.
The story about Bonnie is, again, Deborah was talking about hiring adjuncts at the last minute because you don't know about the classes and all that. But in Bonnie's case, we hired a visiting professor at the last minute. Because, so I called her. We worked together early, and she's here. And make sure that of all of the faculty here, the current faculty here, she's the only person in the room at 8 o'clock when we start on time. Everybody's been invited. So I think that speaks for itself. Ernest.
Good morning. My name is Ernest Hart, and I guess I'm in what I call my second career right now. I am in state government. I'm the director of publications for the Secretary of State's office here in Mississippi. I've been there about a year and a half. Before that, for my first career, I spent about 30 years with the Claim Major here in town. Served in a lot of different roles through the years, in graphic layout design, was a presentation editor, multimedia editor, digital editor, assistant managing editor. Wrote a weekly column on technology and the latest gadgets, computers, cell phones. And since leaving there, I still write a technology blog to kind of keep my passion going there. I travel around doing workshops on graphics and design and multimedia. I've been here to Jackson State several times, over to Grambling. Recently down at University of Southern Mississippi, Belhaven, Delta State, all over. And so I'm pleased to be here today to share some of my experiences. When I started in this business, it was before computers, I'm going to date myself. The newsroom was full of typewriters. Computers hit around early 1980s, 82, something like that. And the servers were biggest refrigerators, and now they're this size. So, I've seen the transitions from the big to the small. You know, I've seen how staff had to adapt to the changing technology. We used to draw on drafting boards. Now you won't find a drafting board anywhere. You know, it's all done by computers now. Apple Macintosh, most cases, all the software packages. Everything's digital. So that's what students are going to be coming into a digital world. But the main thing is basics. I mean, I don't care. You can't lay out a page on an iPad. I still preach good modular design, good layout, relationship between images, being concise, being accurate. All the basics, you still need those. You can't throw those out the window. I don't care how much technology you have. You can't get away from the basics, and that's what I bring to the table. I'm glad to be here today.
Okay, so the conversation with a guy named John Johnson, excuse me, Jim and Jason, but John Johnson was the coolest white guy I've ever met. He was saying, Aaron, if you talk to Aaron, you realize Aaron is installed a computer system today. So I didn't know that. Aaron's one of these guys that you don't say a whole lot. Just sits back in the corner, but he takes everything. He's one of the smartest people in the world. Okay. Don't take that for granted just because he doesn't say it. He's one of the smartest people in the world. So, great, and definitely need you here from the technology perspective. So again, thanks for giving Jackson State University this credit. Okay. There.
My name is Terrence Harris. I'm a reporter / enterprise sports reporter for NOLA.com, a New Orleans Times PBA. 22 years into the business, primarily as a newspaper guy. Y'all had this, this digital world kind of thrust upon me. And I mean, I've done one that said, okay, this is where it's at. Let's roll with it. Let's see what we can come up with. And I think for the last 6 years, I've worked for digital companies primarily. And this was the first time that I've worked for a newspaper that decided to become a digital operation. And so it's been interesting. I mean, obviously, because this is so new to us, it's such a new thing, and we're going through a lot of ups and downs, and we're kind of learning as we go. So it's been interesting, but I think that, it's when Eric contacted me about coming, I was excited to come have this conversation because I see some of the skills that I know that I'm lacking, because when I was coming up from going through college, this wasn't even a thought. We didn't know we'd be here. And so you kind of recognize where the shortcomings are, where you need to make students better so that when they do come out, that they're ready to deal with this new media age. And I have a lot of discussions. One of my closest friends was actually one of my former professors, and he's a guy by the name of Justice Hill. And he's now back down at my alma mater, Ohio University. And so we're having discussions almost daily about what these kids lack, what the problems are, and how you can make them better. So I mean, I'm very, very in tune to this point in this whole subject. And so like I said, I was definitely very excited to come. So much so that I forgot when I said yes, I forgot that today is my birthday.
I'm gonna take you out for your birthday. That's the kind of guy I am. I'm gonna take you to a jazz club with some of your friends.
Sounds like a fun.
The editor about terrorists, there was 3 of these guys that were interns in Cleveland in '91, which is the year that I moved back to Jackson. So we had a lot of fun. And these guys helped me pack the truck. If I move in there. So, I had seen, I think we had talked to NAPJ.
Maybe
Yeah, but I actually went on the New Orleans Picks website looking for a guy named Mark Celeste, who used to work at the Fairway. You may remember. You remember Pulitzer Prize winner, did a lot of stuff with the Katrina stuff. And so, going down the website, and I saw Terrence's pictures. I said, wow, we got all about you us things. Call Terrence because you know, for the reason you just said, I mean, you're out there, you see that you're having to deal with the change, and again, you couldn't make it part of this experiment. So, and that was what, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago?
something like about a week ago.
Yeah, so thanks for being here.
And you're close by.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My apologies for being tardy. I actually went to the wrong place. I went to the hotel, so I had to come back over this way. My name's Ryan Hayes. I hold the vaunted title of news editor at the Jackson Free Press, which is a local alternative news weekly. I'm the editor. I'm also 50% of the reporting staff. I cover state government. I've been covering city government as well lately. And I've been here for 3 years after living out west in Seattle, Colorado, Mexico for a little bit. But I'm from St. Louis originally, worked in Springfield, Illinois, covered state politics and government there for about 4 years. And this is an interesting process for me because I was at the University of Colorado when they were dismantling their journalism school. And it was surprising and disheartening to see the school divest from journalism education. And it seems like that's the direction, unfortunately, like whether they admit it or not, a lot of places are going. And so to have an institution like Jackson State that's actually going in the opposite direction and realizing the importance of journalism and actually looking to put resources into it, really exciting for me. We're here, we decided to come to Mississippi. So.
Well, thanks, Ariel. And from just really appreciate some of your recent stuff. Really appreciate the stuff from Missouri, just that whole thing. But our relationship is that, I guess I'm still writing when you call it 39. Hey man, what's going on? Hey man, what's going on? Taking 9 Jackson stuff, but just appreciate again your aggressiveness and just with when you look at the free presses and advocates of the world around listening. And just having to do stuff a little bit differently, just from mainstream media anyway. Just clearly you guys need to be here, so again, thanks a lot.
My name is Sekou Smith, and I'm a proud JSU alum, class of '97. And first and foremost, I'm here because the guy who opened doors for me when I was a student here emailed me, and I don't even remember reading the whole email. He just said, I need you to send it back, said, let me know when and where. But I'm unique, and I'm a little bit younger than Terrence. I've had the journalism experience from Blue and White Flash to the West Jackson Journal, which was created out of Shannon by Eric and a bunch of us students when I was here, to working at the Planet Ledger, to leaving there and going a bunch of different places, Indianapolis, Atlanta. I work now for Turner Broadcasting, and I do what we're talking about. I do all of it. I create a blog, I do a television show, I do a podcast, I do XM radio, so all of the things we're talking about marrying, I'm married to already. I hope that we are having a forward-thinking discussion, because when I was a student here, the vision of what the industry would be is what it is now. That was a long time ago. So we're already starting from behind the curve, and I talk to people about that all the time where I work. My training here allows me to do things that a lot of the people I work with at Turner can't. I knew how to write, I knew how to articulate, and do broadcasts. We had the Weather Channel, I see people on the Weather Channel all the time that walk the same halls I did when I was here. I know a lot of people who went to school with us here who are still in business and stuff because of the training we got here. It wasn't just academic training, it was practical training. My second year in school, I went down to the Clarion Ledger, and I didn't even know the people down there, but they opened the door for me, and and the opportunities were numerous. And I think more so than worrying about what the kids lack when they get here, the ones that do have skills, and there are lots of them that have a wide range of skills that would be applicable to the marketplace now. You have to open doors for them when they come here. That's what happened for me. It's the reason I'm still in the business 20 years later. And it's the reason you're going to find some students with the drive and determination to do this for a long time to come. And those are the ones that have to be focused on. I think it's very important that we don't lose sight of the fact that this is, like any industry, is one that is about your passion, your work ethic, whether or not you're willing to sacrifice some things, which I never did get to a step show when I was here. I've been to homecoming twice in all the years I was a student, and since I graduated, some things you give up to chase this career. And I think we need to make sure we reiterate that to the students now, that you have to sacrifice some things if you want to have a career in this field.
All right. I'm gonna start crying with my safety. I was
Please, let's get a picture.
I was an adjunct professor here when Sekou was a student that was in my class. Some things still jump out at me about him. One, he was one of the handful of guys that used to read the newspaper, carry the newspaper around, asking me, where's the paper? I was right, yeah. And he's right. I mean, we did start a newspaper called the West Jackson Journal. Just me and 3 students, he was one of them. I used to ask these guys to come to work on Saturdays, and they just never questioned that. Just showed up. And but Sekou is just, I think he did say he's always a gifted writer, always a great student. I mean, came to class, did his work, and came here knowing what he wanted to do. And for me, I just kind of got polished him up, but it's just, can't say enough about him. He is by far my star student, just in terms of my teaching career. I'll tell anybody that. So again, thanks a lot.
Well, I guess I will close it out. I'm Jason Taylor. I came in August 4th, as the president and publisher of the Clarion Ledger and the East Group regional president of basically Louisiana, Alabama, North Florida, that region of it, of Gannett. And so, been a little crazy. My career's fascinating. I don't want to get into too much of it, but I've been blessed by my wildest dreams in this business. This move was about us getting closer to family. We felt like we were at a point where we could choose, and we chose to be here. We feel really optimistic about the future of this place, about Jackson, about Mississippi as a whole. I started out paid my way through college selling advertising. Eric knows some of this. It's worth going back even further because I think it relates to a lot of your students. I grew up on welfare, government housing projects. My parents were drugs, alcohol, you name it, abuse. And I got into the business because I was on free lunch. And I was so embarrassed about being on free lunch. The only way you could get out of the cafeteria was to go work for the school newspaper. And so I would go to work for the school newspaper. And one thing led to another. I ended up doing it through college, paid my way through college, got a good scholarship, moved up, became an ad director at 23, which is very unusual in this business. And I'll never forget it because I walked out of the announcement. I told my wife, hey, we were engaged. I said, I'm going to interview for this job. She said, Jason, there's no way they're going to hire you for that job. And I became an ad director. I remember the staff was like, he's just a baby. What's he going to do? Well, we were in a David and Battle Goliath with Gannett at the time. It was a small privately owned newspaper, and we pushed Gannett out of the market. And they ended up suing us and suing me personally. So it kind of became a real big deal. Well, we won the lawsuit, and then it won in appellate court, and then it became like a national news story. And so my career just skyrocketed. I was maybe 27, 28. I was turning down opportunities like crazy. And then Gannett came in and bought all of our papers that we owned. And when they did that, I was included in the contract as an asset that my old company maintained. So Gannett was not allowed to speak to me. So then 6 months later, Gannett called me And they said, not only do we want you to go to our most competitive market in the country. And I was speaking all over the country, my career was on fire, and I said, oh, whatever, you're just trying to hire me to fire me, I know this game. And they said, no, and I said, you've sued me. So they said, well, I said, where is it? And they said, Honolulu. And I said, I'll call you back. And I go home and I tell my wife, and this is literally what I said, and I'm not embarrassed of it. I said, all the grief they've caused me, I said, I'm going to go on a free vacation on them. Let's just go and interview for a week, and we'll come back. And we went, and then they made us the offer, and we were like, there's no way we can pass it up. And it was my chance to go from community paper to one of the largest metros in the country. And it was the worst performing paper in Gannett at the time, 96 of 96. And when I left, we'd been #1 for 3 years. And it was a union environment. I was a minority. Just as I am in this room, I was a total minority there. I was my kids were the only white kids in our school. And it was all Asian.
Where was that?
At Honolulu.
Okay.
And it was a fascinating time for my life, a fascinating time in my career. Well, anyway, then I was recruited back to Chattanooga from Gannett. Walter Hussman, who's the famous battle against Gannett in Little Rock, he recruited me away from them when I was Executive of the Year and winning all the awards in Gannett. And I went to work for him in Chattanooga. It became the #1 performing newspaper in the United States of all metros for 6 years in a row. Pulitzer finalist 3 times in the last 6 years, won every major award in the country. So we were very, very blessed. And then this, Gannett has been after me for 6 years. And then this year they finally said, what would it take? And I gave them 5 criteria, one of which was getting closer to family and being a group president, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just been, I feel really called to be here. And I know that sounds silly to some people, but I really do. I feel like Jackson needs a good newspaper. I feel like Mississippi needs a good, strong state newspaper again. I think Clarion Ledger has made a lot of boneheaded decisions. I'm very vocal about that. I think Gannett has made boneheaded decisions in Jackson. And, they're giving me the freedom right now to fix that. And I'm excited about it. I wish you could meet some of these editor candidates we've been interviewing, because as we talk right now, I think, man, I wish you could, some of them are just saying the same things that you're saying. And, I'm interviewing kids out of Vanderbilt and that can't look at me in the eye when I'm talking to them. They're so worried about this.
In
So
the interview?
yeah, it's crazy nowadays. It is crazy nowadays. But I'm excited about the potential and the opportunity that exists. I think there is a tremendous need for minority journalists in this country, in our company, my company, largest media company in the world. But in general, there's just a need, and there's money out there for that. I found it in Hawaii with Asian American journalists. I mean, there's tons of opportunity to fund those kinds of things as well. And I think we need to be bringing forth better journalists and better prepared journalists. But at the end of the day, I want to say one other thing. Journalism's still a profitable business. And I get so frustrated when we talk about it not being, because it is still a profitable business. We still make more money than an automobile dealership, percentile-wise, a grocery store, but yet it's not the 50% profit it used to be. And that's the struggle. It's still a profitable business, and journalism is still very vibrant and important. It's just we've got to change the perception of our industry as well. So anyway, thanks a lot. I'll get on my soapbox very quickly.
Okay,
Anyway,
and,
but thank you for having me. I feel very lucky to be here.
well, the editorial comment here is that Jason and I had lunch, and despite some of our obvious differences, we were able to get through the minutia in less than 3 minutes to have a real conversation about the newspaper, about the community, about Gannett, and so and about his vision for the newspaper. So I was really, really in earnest, and Jim, and I'm going to talk about Jim Ewing in a minute, we can do roll call on the publisher of the Clarion Ledger, and how important that role is, and the fact that, in my humble opinion, you guys have been disappointed. Paper hadn't had a real publisher since Bill Hunsford. There was somebody that really got it.
I agree.
Okay. So I was really, really moved by that conversation, and some of the questions you asked me about the newspaper. And whole thing, Perry, if I tell you is that I left the Clarion Ledger's full-time employee in 2007. People still think I work for the Clarion. So You know, to defend the Clarion Ledger. Okay, so, and my point there is just that, you know, I can't, you know, I want the newspaper to do well because it's so much part of my history and my legacy. So again, thank you so much for being here. Again, you represent a lot, particularly from the Gannett perspective and what Gannett means. And so I think we're really, really fortunate to have your perspective at the table. And I know a lot of us will have questions about that. So again, thanks. Last person I want to say something about is Jim Ewing over in the corner. Jim is staff, what's his title? He's a media relations specialist now for University Communications here at Jackson State. Jim is a former editorial head of the Clarion Ledger, probably won the editorial writer of the year, what, 3 times, 4 times, something like that? I tell people, Jim is a machine in terms of writing, in terms of turning stuff around, in terms of just being a journalist. And so while he's in his role as a media respirator in terms of capturing this stuff, I just had to say, just let everybody know again who's in the room and just what his talents are. And I don't know how much time you got, but it's perfect time. Somebody says something you think is way, way out, please chime in. Okay. All right, now.
And so you're gonna introduce Miss Fallon,
And this is Miss Fallon Sutton. Some of you guys probably time to make arrangements, but she's basically gonna be our recorder. And again, thank you so much for all you've done to get everybody in these seats around.
Good morning. How y'all doing?
Eric, can I just say one thing?
Sure.
Just sort of full disclosure, because some people know I write freelance for the publication Diverse Issues in Higher Education. I know all of this is off the record. I'm not, doing anything for the publication while I'm here. But if I do get any story ideas, like I've already gotten one about the assault on the humanities, I might follow up and contact you all later, if that's okay?
please.
That's why I love journalism.
Please.
Disclosure.
Yes. Follow up. Yes.
Thank you.
Sit next to me.
We're supposed to take a break at 10, and I think I can wrap, I think we can make that target in terms of the first session is supposed to be about the state of mass communication, state of the department. And again, if I didn't be transparent on this process, we're not having credibility, okay? So I'm gonna be extremely transparent from my perspective about where we are with the department, okay? Just a little history. 2014 is the 40th anniversary of the Department of Mass Communication in Jackson State. Started in 1974. One of the first mass communication units at the HBCU to get credited by AJMC. I think we were third behind, I believe it was Howard and Florida A&M. And so we've been around a long time. I've been able to acquire a lot of assets that we've have been unable to create synergy for where it makes sense for everybody, okay? By that I mean, for example, the current structure. We have the TV station and radio station are not a part of the Department of Mass Communication. It's part of University Communication, of which I'm the executive director, okay? And of course, now I'm serving as interim director, as interim chair of the Department of Mass Communication. So that's, in terms of synergy, I mean, that's really an opportunity, okay? Now, don't know how long I'm gonna be in this role, but, so just moving along now, we've had, you mentioned the chair, when I was a student, the chair was Marcia Clinkscales, then Doris Saunders, Elaine Hayes as Doris Saunders, but since Doris Saunders left, who was again I think the last practitioner that head the department, we've had, I lose count of so many, the leadership has been a revolving door. And again, I say this because I'm on record, I served on the search committee in picking the last chair, okay? And I'm on record saying that we should keep looking, okay? this guy was not the fit for the department, and hiring him would mean that we would be continuing to do what we already done. I mean, in terms of somebody with a PhD because we want to get accreditation, that's important. Creditors look at that, yada, 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 yada. But I have to say though that this administration, based on Dr. Barnes' recommendation, looked at it and said, no, this is wrong, okay, and made a change, which I thought was a good thing. And then they thrust me in this position, okay, because, I have running university communication is a full-time job, okay, trust me, so. But I couldn't say no to being chair because, again, the Irish reading is the opportunity for some synergies. And just, and hopefully this opportunity just makes sense of all the stuff that's here at the university in terms of the platform that we talked about and getting people together, okay? And creating some strategic partnerships, whether it's with the Clarion Ledger, whether it's with the Advocate, whether it's with the Free Press. I think there's room, quite frankly, for all three, particularly when you think about students. The timing of this was really, really good too, as Dr. Barnes mentioned, in terms of just where we are with staffing in the department. Okay, we've got 3 people who are on terminal contracts. They will be, this is it for them, okay? We've already we have 3 vacancies, okay? And with the line I'm in, we have 4 vacancies. So that's really 7 positions, okay? We were going up for our accreditation agency expires at the end of this school year. So the question becomes, we were going down the road for reaccreditation, which, to be quite honest, would have been a patchwork process of smoke and mirrors just to fool the accreditors, okay? And the administration had the integrity to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to stop, assess, look at what's going on outside of the industry and make the appropriate changes. I mean, we're never going to get an opportunity like this again in terms of how the staffing is lined up, how the leadership is lined up. And so I think that the opportunities are just really, really limited, given the resources that we have. Okay, Harvard has about 250 students. We have a graduate program, if I told you that it wasn't a challenge to also be trying to run the department, doing the other stuff, and all that, I'd be lying. It is. But I also tell you, if I told you that I wasn't having a good time, I'd be lying. I mean, I'm enjoying it. And what hits home every day is that walking down the hall and seeing potential Sacred Smiths who really, all they need is a little bit of direction. And I'm telling you, a little bit of direction is the difference between being at Turner and working at McDonald's. I'm telling you, just that much direction. Because the opportunities are here. And so that's really the state of the department. We have, again, we're advertising for 4 positions. Here are copies of the ads, and again, I'll be transparent, everybody can take it with them. And, but like you guys, though, I'm really, really excited about this spot in history for us, this department, where we need to go. And the challenges, there absolutely are. There are tons and tons and tons and tons of opportunities. I also want to say, just express my confidence in this process. But, yeah, I really, one of the things that we want to do is create a real advisory committee. A national group, just like surrounding this table. And I hope you guys be willing to serve. Perhaps we'll meet quarterly, annually, semi-annually, but just to come to reconnect about this process, about the department. Because again, I think in Jackson, at Jackson State, we really have an opportunity to do something extremely special in terms of journalism and communications. And right now, just in terms of the department, it's just poised to take off. again, I think that we got the right leadership in the administration, we got the right leadership in the dean's office. And I don't know if Dr. Barnes made that clear, but mass communication is in the College of Liberal Arts, and which is one of what, about 6 or 7, nine units. But I think her passion about this is pretty clear. And so again, it's a great opportunity. We have some challenges, but again, if I didn't think that we could do something extremely special, that we can, at the end of the day, that we can hold up as a model, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have risked my credibility with you by asking you to come. This is a huge opportunity. With that, it is 10:04.
Let me add one other thing. May I introduce to you the one tenured professor in the Mass Comm department, Mr. Arthur Chang. He is the one.
Let's just start to get some terms of what traditional military look like, and let me be clear too. Now, this is an authentic discussion. The university doesn't have any preconceived notions. We don't have any plans already out there. We're asking you to directly or indirectly endorse. This is an authentic discussion about where we need to go and what it needs to look like and all of that. Again, just based on what you guys think, okay? So I guess one question I have, just to throw this out there, is, some of this is when you think about the technology and all of that, I think some of the stuff is obvious, but there's so many consequences of some of the technology in terms of how I guess the term I've used a lot is teaching journalism versus teaching content collection, okay? And again, we need to understand, at least from my perspective, there's a huge difference between content and journalism, okay? And so when we talked about a school of journalism and communications, okay? To me, the communication part is crucial because I think all of us, it's naive to think that everybody's going to end up with a job in journalism, okay? I think the goal should be for everybody to end up with a job in communications in some kind of way. So just in terms of that, just want to throw that out just in terms of, or when you think about the core stuff, again, besides the technology, should anything change? What should be new about we starting a school, or we from scratch, or reconfiguring as we are doing in an existing program? What should the vision and the mission be?
I would say working in the business now, the focus should be on multimedia, because that's all we talk about now. It's working across platforms, whether it's broadcast, radio, digital production, whatever you're doing, you need to be able to do it in different ways. Prime example is if you are, and I'm not talking about just a local TV outlet, but if you're in the television business, you have to be capable of delivering that stuff on a website, on a blog. You have to have a social media presence. We have to get away from this traditional idea of teaching somebody how to be a newspaper journalist or to be a television personality or a broadcaster. You got to teach them how to be a multimedia journalist, how to do all of those things in some capacity at a ground level, because otherwise you'll never survive in the business today as a specialist in one area. Ernest and I were talking last night about graphic artists. I can't remember last time I saw somebody who was just a graphic artist. You have to be able to do so many different things in the business today that the training has to reflect the reality of what you'll be asked to do once you become a professional.
Okay. That's a great point. The graphic artist piece is a great point in terms of something that was once a specialty that's now fading. Okay. So what should, how should we teach that? And how should that, if you're saying that it should be, it's something all of our students, I mean, where should that be incorporated in the curriculum? Because actually in Mass Comm, graphics, that's more actually in the art department, right, than mass communication. So should there be a,
But there's a requirement for Mass Comm students to take graphic arts, which helps to create the glut in the art department.
right, but there's a difference though between, I took 4 years of French and can only speak a sentence. Parlez-vous français? Okay, so.
Mr. Strippel, can I jump in and say something?
Well, hold that thought for 1 second.
Okay.
So in terms of being a functional graphic designer, being able to do everything you said, and then as well as put a graphic or design element to it, okay? Where should that fit into the curriculum?
Well, that has to fall into the fact that nowadays you're going to be asked more often than not to work in a blog format than you will be on a page design. So you have to be on the cutting edge of whatever the newest technology is for content delivery. Which content, you talk about the difference between content and journalism, there is no difference once you start working. At CNN, it's all the same thing. ESPN content and journalism, the line is blurred. Because somebody has to come up with the content, and it's up to the user to decide,
whether it's entertainment or whether it's journalism.
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Burr.
Oh, I'm sorry, he had something before.
Oh yeah, I just trying to supplement what you just say that graphics arguably may be important because you have informational graphics on newspapers, so that it needs some graphic design skill. If a person can do graphic design, there are some complex issues. For example, years back, the shadow fall from the sky. If you're a good graphic designer, you can design which time frame, where is the shadow. Like sometimes the shadow is over Arizona, then it's in Texas, then between Texas and Louisiana it crash. And you good graphic designer should be able to capture that. And then if you even better use other animation design, then the person can control the time frame as to at certain hours the shadow is about Arizona, certain hours about Texas, and somewhere between Texas it crash. So the user can determine what they want to see. And so actually, piggyback to what you said, I think they need to know how to edit photos, how to do animations, how to design websites, how to do everything here and iPad. All that is that I think news businesses are demanding the newbies about everything, and plus social media.
I was going to say that too about animation and the whole web design. All of it has to be a part of it, and you might want to. I just want to suggest that some of the schools of communication that have incorporated this, especially the same sort of mission and size of Jackson State, you might want to include in some of your discussions, like FAMU, which has a school of journalism and graphic communication. That's the name of the school and the concept of the school.
So it would be worth a visit to.
Right.
Okay.
And the students that I hear back from, because I used to do the internship program there, and the former students who are now working, that I hear from most, who seem to be most successful and the most content in their jobs, are the web designers, animators, all the people. I've got a student that I got him his first internship, I think it was at ESPN, Connecticut, yes, yeah. And he's with the Tennis Channel now. Is that part of that company or?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, he's with the Tennis Channel now, but
Animation, okay.
he's always, and a lot of those students are very content and sort of invigorated.
I've worked on television.
Oh, okay.
I think you guys captured a lot of attention and let people know who you are by even rethinking a little bit the name. In terms of, instead of saying School of Journalism, you should be the School of Digital Journalism and Communications.
Okay.
To show, the forward thinking and where we are, because it's not just journalism anymore, it is digital.
Okay.
And you can't just create journalists, you got to create digital journalists if you want to compete
think that's an amazing point because Bonnie and Dean Barnes that touched on this in their opening statements. They were talking basically about profitability. I mean, how do we monetize it? I mean, how do you make a kid that's coming in to study journalism think that this is a viable career path? I mean, people come to school thinking about how am I going to make money down the road? And in the age of citizen journalists, anyone's a journalist, but very few people are really making money at it. And each year, fewer people are making money at it. I mean, all due respects to your opening statements, I mean, last year, Google made $50 billion in advertising, which is double the amount that every newspaper in America combined made. So, I mean, obviously the metrics of the way the money flows in journalism is changing. So, your name, digital, at least it plants the thought in the student's mind.
Right.
We're cutting edge here. So I think that's an important part. The other thing, and I just want to share a number that I just got. My editor sent this to me, and it just shows how quickly this is changing in real times. Terrence works for an advanced paper. Yesterday...
In Advance, by the way, is a media company.
Yeah, the Newhouse family.
Yeah.
Yesterday, of the 1.8 unique views on NOLA.com, 45% of them were viewed over a smartphone. My paper, The Plain Dealer, of the 1.8 unique views, 35% smartphone. My point is, how can we begin to teach traditional journalism to the smartphone, though? I mean, what I'm increasingly seeing at our property in Cleveland are these young people that they know how to get clicks, the top 10 donut stores in Cuyahoga County. We know how to drive traffic, but it's not real journalism. So I think your challenge is even bigger than the current practitioners who are just desperately trying to stay ahead of the curve. You guys have to teach people how to be real journalists in the age of digital journalism, which I think dovetails perfectly with the point that Terrence just made.
Okay.
So I'll pick up there, and then I want to recircle back. Teaching someone to participate fully in the business as it presents itself today, I think requires a certain context that I don't see reflected in the coursework. And so I would imagine something earlier on in the curriculum that really tells the story of, and invites people into a conversation of how media is working historically and into the future, right? The business of media, right? In some cases, you have, the story itself has a lot of drama to it. I don't know that anybody's written a textbook, but I know that there are a number of pieces. I feel comfortable at this table referencing Page One, a documentary about the New York Times, right? And there's that epic moment where David Carr is sitting at the table with the guys on Vice, and he says, look, you put on a safari helmet and went out to a beach and saw some human poop. That doesn't mean you get to insult what we do. Zoom out 3 years, I don't know how long it's been since that documentary, and now Vice has a $2.3 billion valuation, right? And they don't have a $2.3 billion valuation because of a strict multiple on their revenue. I know those guys, they're not doing numbers like that. The reason they have that kind of valuation is because they have that shared culture, right? They have the cosign from being syndicated by HBO. They have the YouTube partnership, which is not really financially in their favor, but culturally is in their favor. Because now they're standing up on big wallscapes in the middle of, in downtown Soho, and YouTube is putting all this pressure on, go to the Vice News channel, so on and so forth, right? For people to be expected to participate in this business fully and not have that historical perspective laid on, I think is a miss.
Okay.
So in terms of like a discrete piece of information that needs to be, the seed for which needs to be planted early on in their journey, I think that's one. I'd also back out to this point about design, multimedia. I think one of the things you want to be training for is whatever disruption we've all experienced around the table. I'm probably on the tail end of that. Thinking about the average age around the table, how different things are when we started versus where we are right now. That rate of increases is only going to double.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one of the things you want to avoid as you think about how to reboot this is teaching hard skills that are ultimately going to be consumed by software. And so design fundamentals are absolutely important, right? Those are baseline semiotic structures that we all understand. They make things more legible. I mean, you can think of a certain degree of training in design as grammar, as teaching grammar, right? But what you don't want to do is go headlong into here's how to, you need to figure out how to code, you need to figure out how to do this, you need to figure out how to do that, because all of those things, if you watch the pattern, ultimately get automated, right? And I think, one telling story that I read recently was, is anybody familiar with the New York Times snowfall pieces? They put a ton of resources into developing this mobile story format, this beautiful multimedia, mobile first experience. And it was gorgeous. I would send a link around. Everybody should experience this, it's incredible. But later, they wound up suing another company who released on their blog the ability to build the same product within 48 hours, 72 hours, something like that. So the story is, New York Times spent hundreds of man hours and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in development costs to build this thing, and we've replicated it in 72 hours, right? And by the way, here's the source code. Anybody can tell a story, in a snowfall format at this point. And I think that, all the parts of that story are germane in this conversation. The fact that it's 72 hours, the fact that somebody spent the development cost up front that other people were then able to see the end product and create cheats too. And I think where you don't want to steer yourself is to a place where people are learning skills that are going to be consumed. I think you want them to be fluid, comfortable, telling stories in multiple formats. You want to train for that elasticity more so than you want to train for the fundamentals of how to get it done, the actual mechanics of how to get it done.
Yeah, I think that for planning purposes, we have to look at least 5 years down the road, maybe 10. The smartphones, they came out 2007, got on good. Now we're in the smartphone age, we got the tablets, and now here come the smartwatches. Apple is out next year, in the spring probably. So who knows what's going to follow that? So we got to be careful that we don't get locked into teaching today's technology. So by the time a lot of these students get out and get out into the real world, it's going to be something else. So we almost got to, we got to try to predict what's going to be out there that they're going to have to deal with once they hit the job market or get out into the marketplace. It's going to be a completely different world. So what's coming and what should we be teaching now is going to really prepare them for the future. Just smartphones might not be the thing 4 years from now.
But the common thread I'm hearing from everybody though is technology.
Yes.
And it's, if I can add to that, what it sounds like and what I've been thinking about in terms of trying to revamp my classes so that they are not what I did 20 years ago, is that students need to be able, even if this is not the platform, it's a variation of it. And learning or education is not facts and figures. It's the ability to take what you've got, because it's going to tie into this, and then when the new thing comes out, you're able to figure it out. So what I'm thinking about with my students is, why aren't they doing it now in their hands? So my assignments can't be something that I hand out in paper form. It needs to come to them here. I almost thought about the perfect class as I was thinking about this discussion. 30 minutes of giving them what it is you need to do. Like you do in a newsroom, or like you do in the world that you all work in. Then 30 minutes to go out on campus and collect. And then 30 minutes to come back to the classroom and talk about what you have. Or how you do it in the field. You get it out there and then you got to send it to somewhere on campus in the digital area. And you have a teacher there that's editing and talking to you about it. but you gotta have hands-on. You can't have a student, I can't have a student anymore who sits in my class for an hour and 20 minutes and doesn't have hands-on. They just don't have that, and they shouldn't. They don't have, because I don't see them as the job fillers. I see them as the entrepreneurs. You called, Otha, I think it was, a hustler. I think he's an entrepreneur.
Oh, he is.
And that's the word that we want our students saying. I want graduates who are entrepreneurs.
Right.
So.
And that's
I
one of the
think
questions,
that
the whole
format,
piece, yeah. But, that's definitely one of the questions, but, okay, and just so the record is clear, what's jumped out at me is animation, digital,
Yeah.
okay,
Digital
technology.
what? For the recording?
No, just the digital in terms of the message.
Yeah.
Presentation.
Okay.
And Jeff, and what you're saying, just not just the technology, but and what just looking, just predicting or projecting what the technology may be. I mean, that's awesome.
Even assuming, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not predicting. I think it's assuming that I might be making this a little too narrow. That software is going to, that all the things that we want to do, all the things that are going to be replicated and kind of mass manufactured, are going to be increasing cheats to get that done. So you think about the listable format, your 10 favorite donut shops, or 15 reasons you were born in the 80s or whatever. When BuzzFeed brokered that format, somebody was actually typing that out. Right? They typed the number 1 and they wrote a thing and they added a picture, and now there's a carousel for that. There's an open source carousel that everybody uses because it's just it's the way that people get clicks, it's the way that people serve banner ads, right? So I think, just assuming that whatever the technical hurdles are going to be compressed, so that the real imagination, the real entrepreneurism, and the real kind of lateral ability to tell a story in whatever format is going to be able to shine with or without the technical asks of this particular one.
I like the direction it's going, and I contributed to that with all the, talk about the design and animation and all that. But I do want to go back to what Deborah was talking about in her introduction too. And also what we had here with Jason, the example of these digitized minds sitting in an interview and not having decent communication skills, interpersonal skills, because that's been lost. And I just did an interview, phone interview a couple days ago on some STEM topics with some people with NOAA, the government oceanic agency and stuff. And they had, the person I was talking with had been a mentor at a conference that they had, bringing students and grad students in, and they got to mentor with scientists. And this person, who is a scientist, was saying that his mentoring involved helping these grad students who were brilliant engineers, biologists, putting together great research, helping them learn how to interview for a job, which you teach kids in high school basically, but that it's been lost somewhere. And listening to these people say, hey, these are brilliant kids, but it's hard to get them to learn how to have a conversation with somebody, and to communicate effectively. And I think one of the things here, like, we have a lot of people who are good communicators, but somewhere in there we had that basic, we didn't grow up within all of this. We already had developed some of these skills that were required as basic learning skills. And then the communication skills and the articulation and just interpersonal, how to relate to people. So I don't want that to be left, because especially since we're talking about communication. Right.
Well, one of the changes that we've discussed about making is moving the speech program, which is now coupled with theater, speech and theater, back into mass comm. Because it's not prospering where it is, and it doesn't even have to be a major, it just needs to be a competency that people can accomplish. But in as much as I am one of the few teachers around the room, let me focus your answers a different way. We need to think in terms of what the core curriculum would be. I mean, we're sort of getting at that, but I want you to think more bullet-like. What is the core curriculum going to be? What are the student learning outcomes that we want? What do we want people to be able to do specifically so that we can think in terms of core that everybody will take and then spin out into these other areas? So wait a minute, before you go, before I lose my thought. What I have from what you said was animation, digital presentation, graphic communication, that might be the same thing. I wrote down from what you said, storytelling, and then communication skills. Is that?
Yes. I think at the end of the day, when I hear all of this being said, I think we're talking about the creation of content and being able to do it across any platform. And that includes graphics. Can you create graphics in HTML? Can you create them on a video screen? Can you create them in print? Can you create them in high gloss magazine? Because everyone needs to be able to jack of all trades and be entrepreneurial, to be a journalist in today's world. So, and I think the same goes for the graphics. It goes for, and then in person, can you communicate a message in person? Because who knows, it could be all on Google Glass someday. We could all be, and so can someone visually stand in front of me in a hologram form and share information with me? That may be what's coming. And so I think it's that dissemination of content across, and I love your idea of the history of media, and understanding how the bills have been paid historically, because you're not going to understand how to pay them going forward. And I think that's huge, and especially now when everything's getting down to the individual. If you talk to the major retailers of the world, Macy's, Dillard's, they say, you know what we're struggling with now is getting face-to-face with someone. If you can give me a way to get face-to-face with 10, 12 people, then you've done it, because everyone's buying from me out here. And they don't want to come in my stores. So I don't need 650,000 square feet, because they're not coming in anymore. And so I think, so that getting back to that personal, interpersonal is part, it makes sense to move speech into, because it's a platform of delivery of content. And if you think the model, the model of media has always been, we create content, it attracts eyeballs, and we sell those eyeballs. And so that's what we're doing now. We create content, it attracts eyeballs, and we sell those eyeballs. Face to face, we create an event, people come to the event, we sell the eyeballs. And I think that's really, so it's I love what you said in the beginning, and just that, it's all about multi-platform content, and even the emerging platforms, Google Glass, Google, Gannett right now has invested a lot in what's it called, the glasses that show the virtual reality glasses. They've invested a lot, and they did their first news pieces in Des Moines, Iowa, with virtual reality, because they feel like that's a big part of storytelling in the future because of gaming. All these people are growing up gaming now, and so they want to interact with the news. They don't want the news to just come to them.
Derek, I think Chaucer mentioned something very important in his introduction to that. The kids coming in will comprehend and understand even better than the instructors, and that's branding. And I think this goes to a larger point about social media and just how you construct a digital profile of yourself. I explain to my kids all the time about if you can put your name, Google your name and see what comes up. In your digital profile, whether it's something on Facebook, any kind of social media website, comes up in an organized, ordered list, prioritized list. And if you have students who don't understand how all of this works in terms of what it means for their name, their brand, just as an individual journalist before you have a job or when you have a job, if they don't understand how the entire matrix works in digital media, like Terry was talking about, they're going to be behind the eight ball. So you have to bring them in, and that has to be a component of the instruction when they come here. Just learn how to use the tool as a whole to become a storyteller, or you're going to have to teach them how to tell stories and how to interview. That's what you learn in journalism, in any journalism school or any communication school. They're trying to teach you how to become a professional. but they have the added weight of all these other things that are gonna be attached to their name or their profile that they need to understand how to manage once they come here. And I haven't heard anybody mention it like that, the way he did his introduction, which is funny to me because I've been around for a long time. And nobody comprehend, you know, we have so many people who are in the business on one end, but not on the front end of it, and thinking about how that is matched up. And we have to start understanding that relationship.
And, you know, I think for people on the academic side, I think it becomes incumbent upon them to try to figure out how to creatively teach the basics. Because these young folks that are coming in now, this is all they know, and they can't relate to that other stuff. So you've got to create that platform in a creative kind of way to get, you know, to keep their interest, you know, because all the while they're doing this. You know what I mean?
That intro to
so that's how
media
you get
course
that basic.
has changed.
Yes.
That's gotta be different.
Yes.
And so does so does the history of mass communications and the history of journalism stuff too, because I'm sure we teach some of it, but now need some updates.
I dreaded it. I couldn't stand it. No, I couldn't stand it when I was here. I was like itching to get downtown and go to the Clarion Ledger, learn from the people who were in the newsroom down there. Seriously.
But that's my question. I don't know if there's presently a media lab where they're collaborating with other departments across the campus to do projects, you know, so you have a hands-on to understand the power of the media, where they're actually doing projects. Because that's so important. And if that's not happening, then, I mean, I know everyone's talking about careers and jobs, and the majority of them probably will just, you know, have a job or a career. But I mean, media, you know, I see, you know, these are power players, make or break people in the field. And so I want them to feel like, you know, they can be empowered to empower their communities. I mean, that's what Jackson State is, a place where you come together to learn how to empower your community, wherever that may be, to stay home or to go abroad. And the media serves that purpose. So I mean, we're supposed to be creating leaders, you know, thought-provoking leaders, and that's why it's in liberal arts, because that's where you do your critical thinking. And we have to figure out how to combine all of that together. So we're creating smart people. I don't really care about smart devices. You know, we really need smart people, because some smart devices make us dumb. And how do you get us to research? Can you research without going to Google?
No.
I mean, we need to make sure that research is a critical part of what we do without the instruments. Because when the lights go off and they're, you know, how are you gonna function? I mean, I learned how to paste up. I was copygraphic machineries. I couldn't, that sound was cutting it off. You know, but we have to make sure that they know that they're, if you're looking for apple, you can go to tree, you can go to juices, and you'll come at some point that there's apple juice, there's an apple tree. But I'm so afraid that we're getting so used to devices and teaching our kids devices that they couldn't go to the library and look up the way we used to.
They cannot.
They cannot. It doesn't
And I'm
even
nervous
exist.
about making everything digital.
That's already gone.
No, that's
Yeah.
Right.
Card
They don't exist anymore. I mean, that card is, I mean, it's out of there now, so you can't really go back. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but you can't really go back. You have to deal with what's going on in reality. And the reality is that going back and doing it the traditional way is not efficient. It's so far gone that to try to really go back and rehash all that would, I think, almost be counterproductive. I think we have to understand Google is our friend. So are some other search engines. Teach our kids, teach young people how to use those tools to their advantage. I mean, I don't believe that we'll have that day. I don't believe that day is going to come when the world's going to go dark and we're going to be in trouble. I just don't believe that. I mean, I think that it does. I think getting the news out is the last part.
Well, you know, I just know I'm such a better person because I have both.
Well, we are.
And we can transfer that somehow.
We are the best, and right now this world needs us because we we can bridge that gap, I mean, because we've been there, we've seen that, and we've also we're now dealing with this new world. But we have to understand that we have to go to where our young people are and meet them there and then bring them along. But I mean, so I don't know, I mean, I hear what you're saying, it does sound great. I just don't think that, when we start dealing with the practical reality, I don't see it anymore. I think we have to understand that, we have these new tools out here that can help our children and help our young people advance, and we have to teach them how to use those tools.
Yeah, I also think there's something to be said for the judicious use of these tools, right? Far be it for me at this table to have any kind of point of view on what makes a great journalist. I have kind of what's the name? I know when I see it. Potter Stewart. I'm Potter Stewart. Threshold for good journalism, right? Especially in this room. But I think there is a mandate on you if you're going to be shaping specifically journalists, but I would argue most anybody in the media arts, that they learn how to use these tools in a way to find truth, not just find popularity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the threat of Google is not, there's nothing wrong with Google. Google's presenting the clickstream of everybody who looked for that thing, right? And they're giving you the most likely answer for whatever it is that you're asking for. And I think that, again, like the mandate for journalists is, I'm not looking for what everybody else was looking for or found satisfactory. I'm looking for the truth, right? And so figuring out how to leverage these tools judiciously, I think it's different than whether or not we use them in requests.
Okay. Let me ask you this, and by the way, we've been joined by Sonny Fitch, who's one of the professors in the department. Thanks. Here's the stuff, and I hear this thread too, and going back to the title, and to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but going back to what I was saying about journalism versus content, okay? And you and I have had this discussion a little bit about the focus being heavily on journalism versus having a focus that's on communications, and one of them, and underneath that umbrella of communications, it's journalism. Okay, what do you guys think about that? I mean, I know that most of us around the table are journalists, have journalism backgrounds, but again, just from what I see, okay, the jobs are going to be in communications, and not the narrow thing that we're calling journalism, as you're saying, Sekou, is being, and you're saying directly and indirectly, that is being redefined.
The jobs are in content gathering and delivery.
Yeah.
Right. That's what the jobs will be.
I was going to say, I would have called it information management. Finding information, doing something with it, finding truth, deciding how you're going to deploy it. More than I would have called it journalism per se. Because certainly at the undergraduate level, you want people to come out with some basic skills that they can deploy. However, most of us aren't doing, many of us, some of us, aren't doing what we studied in undergrad. We studied some and then we had some life and went into some other things. So you want to come out with those skills that let you manage an array of things, even if you don't end up being a quote-unquote journalist.
Right, so going back to what, Terrence, what you said earlier, and so again, in terms of name this projecting message, okay? Should it be the School of Digital Communications?
Well, let me say something about the journalism content. To me, journalism is stuff that we have researched, sweated over, applied all your journalistic ethics and principles to.
Including verification.
Verification, accuracy, everything's spelled correctly. Content is aggregation. It's Google, Yahoo, information that came from all over the place. It's out on the internet. You Google something, that's what comes up.
Okay, but let me stop. But to me, it's also in a journalism context, calling up one person, taking what they say is gospel, and putting it on your website and just wear it. Okay, as opposed to, and if it's on a news website, then well, depending on where I get it, I've got different expectations of stuff. Okay, and what I'm saying is, again, a lot of quote-unquote journalism outlets are doing what I call just putting some content out there that has not been verified and passing it off or trying to sell it as what most of us know as journalism.
And that's the state of the industry right now.
That's what's happening.
It's almost like what Terrence was saying, you know, about where we are. It's you almost can't go back and pull that back
Okay.
because it's gotten.
And that's,
Yeah.
all right, and I get that, and that's my question. I mean, just in terms of going forward with instruction,
Right.
should we just be saying that? Forget the.
No, you gotta try. But I think it's almost gone past this.
I think it's a question of what this is a business, right? Like we're talking about a business, right? This many people are gonna be journalists. This many people are gonna be content producers, which includes journalists, right? So it's like, to me, you just need to decide what it is that you're doing. If you are trying to prepare people for a sector, then you're gonna have a name that reflects that, you're gonna have a program that reflects that. If you're trying to train someone for a job within a broader sector, then the rest will flow.
You know, I just will say this. I don't think that it has passed us. I think we're in the middle of it.
Okay, I'm just saying.
I think it's transformed.
We're trying to.
I don't think we're past that, you know,
We're
because
trying.
there are some blurred lines between content and journalism, and some people will argue that it's the same.
Well, let me
So
throw
I don't
this-
think it's past.
let me throw this about where we are on the spectrum, makes me think of your graphic, that it would take roughly 5 years to get this into play
That's what I'm saying.
as a curriculum. Okay, so wherever we are, we're not gonna be there when this starts. So you can't plan this for where we are, you gotta think, and you can't even think what that is, right? But, and so that, we got two problems, trying to think where it'll be 5 minutes, 5 years down the road when it comes online, and who in the world is gonna teach it? Who's gonna teach it? The people who are already in the mix are right here, and we need them to be down there, we don't know what that is
Well, they
yet.
have to continue to be trained.
I
yeah.
think, like you
Who's
said, we're
training
getting into this
Yeah.
false notion
That's exactly right.
of journalism and upholding these principles of how to do business. The number of people who are gathering, you know, putting together this content, delivering it, I think they get outshined by the outrageous. The blogs have turned it into, you know, what's the most shocking thing I can do. But if you look at the numbers in digital media, the touchstones are the same. New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, those are trusted outlets. Anybody can click on Deadspin or Media Takeout in these sites, and that'll create this idea that, well, this is what everybody's doing, but that's not the case. Any good traditional media outlet has a web presence that's thriving. Like that's where their resources are going. That's where their focus and attention is. And you don't just throw stuff out there. You take your best people and have them produce the content that's being gathered and delivered in that space.
One would hope.
No, I mean it's just any good company
Yeah.
is doing
I get what you're, okay.
I think, you know, those are the goals, and I mean, and there's fine journalism still being done.
Absolutely.
Sources corroborated, you know, I mean, ethics being abided by, or attempts being made to do that. But I think part of the problem is that if you can get your students, your undergraduate students, to focus, I mean, you know, to understand that the lines are blurred, but here's what we want you to do, and in a digital format to be able to cross platforms and all of that. But these are still the guiding principles. I think if you can inspire the students in that way, that's good. It's hard though because, as you mentioned, they're distracted by all of the glitter, and so you know.
Yeah, that point can't be overstated. I think when I came into the industry,
Being attracted by the glitter? Which
Pardon?
point we talking about?
Teaching students accountability, teaching students, you know, to stay on track. When I came into the industry, we still had mentors. We had people who had been in the newsroom 15, 20 years. You know, I started on Night Cops, and I had a guy who spent about 1.5 years with me teaching me how to be a night cop reporter. Today, we're bringing on young journalists who are especially going to our digital end. They have no experience. They have no experienced elders over on that side of the building to show them how to be a responsible reporter. So therefore, increasingly, I'm reading stories that sound like just almost first-person narratives. Like, let's say there's a homicide. You show up and you turn it into a feature story because you don't know how to talk to the cops on the scene. You don't know how to have an understanding of the neighborhood where the homicide happened, history of violence, whatever. So you show up and interview someone who's grieving. My thing is, and the challenge for the department going forward, it seems that in addition to teaching people how to storytell, you're going to have to kind of mentor them in a way that they're not being mentored when they initially break into the industry. Because there are no older people there holding their hands, helping them, showing them how to go through a courtroom and find out where the prosecutors hang out after hours. So I mean, I don't quite understand how you meet that challenge.
I was just getting ready to respond to that because there are hardly any here either.
So maybe
that day has passed. Right. I mean, we're moving away from. I mean, there are obviously mentors for the here and there, but the day of the high touch. This is what I was saying about writing, of having that personal relationship. It would be faulty to try to plan the future on that, because we're like everywhere else where we're asked to do more with fewer people.
And the same amount of time.
And the same amount, or less time.
Yeah.
Because you got to do 10 things. So when this is in part how we had moved to technology in the classroom, because we simply do not have the same human resources that we once had. The trick is going to be in all of this conversation is where you're going to find the people who can teach that futuristic thing. And the academy moves at the pace of glaciers. Okay, that even just getting that curriculum approved through the curriculum committee who won't know what we're talking about. But, and this is what I was saying about the difference between the practitioner and the academic. By the time we get it through, it's already passé. We have to figure out how we're going to get that into something somebody can teach.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest, as a practitioner, you said, what did you say, curriculum review board?
Yes, right, and trust me, they got the whips, the guns, and the chairs.
That sounds tough. I think that the most important thing is to set a foundation for these young people. And to teach them how to be flexible and understand that things will change once they get out here. Because the fact of the matter is, we're always evolving. So no matter what we teach them, what we try, it's always going to be a little bit further ahead once they get out here. But we want them to be flexible enough to be able to deal with the changes once they come out. But we have to. I think the foundation has changed a little bit to where when I was in school in college, you were taught to pick. I wasn't allowed to dabble in broadcast or anything like that. That was taboo back then. If you want to be print, be print.
Right.
Don't go over here to broadcast.
Right.
And if you want to be broadcast, don't go over here to print.
Right.
But now we have to understand that it's combined now. So what we have to do is build these multimedia, multifaceted journalists who can do everything. We have to teach them about when you walk into a story, you're not just thinking about how you're going to write the story, you're thinking about how you're going to portray this in video. You may have to do a voiceover. The other thing on this phone is now called Videolicious that we're doing. All of this crazy stuff that we never thought about back then. So we have to prepare our young people to be able to deal with that. And I think that's where the foundation starts. And I think once we build those type of people, I think once they get out here, it's going to be different. And I can't promise you that everything that I'm going to teach you is what you're going to encounter, because also you're going to find out that every newspaper, every news organization does it a little bit different. Somebody may be working from WordPress, someone may have another format. And you have to be able to be flexible enough to deal with that. But in the meantime, we have to, like I said, we have to build strong, responsible, multi-faceted, multi-capable journalists. And I think that's our charge right now.
Will mentioned something earlier too about the first blush of what you get when you get here is going to be what ultimately leads you to either stay in this department, stay on this track or not. So that first experience you have in the school of digital communication, whatever, cannot be the history of American humanities.
Right.
You know, we sitting there, it has to be,
Right.
it has to be a fresh class,
Intro to mass media.
of what awaits you in this industry. And it has to be something that's built on a kind of a combination of the academic side of it and the practical side of it. That class has to
Excuse me,
be.
from my experience, if you teach them the tools of the technology, they'll be thrilled. I'm teaching online journalism, they all like to play with the paid software, free software, software you can edit on cell phone here. Just try to summarize the confusion about skill level. I think some of the skills never change. Interview skills, be able to write it, go back to original document, be able to search on. Analytical skill, get sources information, analyze that's the correct information. And be able to verify Google search or multiple search engines, be able to say this information is correct and not just hearsay. Those are not changing.
Right.
So we need to teach them both of the basic fundamental skill that's never changing as part of journalism, but the other part they have to be flexible. And if you teach them some of the little technology stuff, I know technology is changing, but I got his experience by my son. He's 10. He get all kinds of technology. So once he got some old technology, when he got a new one, he's not afraid of. So I think they should have some experience with the technology, not necessarily too much coding, but some experience, so they will not be afraid of it. But something thorough to them, they be able to adapt to it because things are going to be constantly changing for sure.
I was just going to jump in real quick though. One of the challenges that I have seen, like you all were saying, how they receive things when they first get in the door. Right now our curriculum is such that a lot of times the students don't really get into it until after their first 2 courses, and then they're almost a junior when they're able to take the hands-on courses. And we have been discussing we've been discussing that for years actually, how do we discover maybe a course that all students can take. At other schools, sometimes they have a course just for freshmen to at least get involved in. And currently what we're doing now, this semester, Mr. Stringfellow was able to, I presented Videolicious to him, you mentioned that. And so now what we're doing is going to the 200 classes, going to her class and other classes, teaching them how to use this video app that allows you to tell a story in just moments. And at least it gets the students at least excited about it. You know, they can put their hands on it. So that's just one step, but it's something. But this is the thought process that we have to develop.
But you know, just going from calling it intro to media to modern media would change a lot. You know, making it about the modern media instead of the history. Can I just say, I'm kind of a visual person, so I've been listening to everything and kind of processing it in a visual format. And I just drew this little sketch, and bear with me, I know I'm weird. But if you look at the foundation, like if bringing a kid in, a student in, and you're teaching them the basics, at the end of the day, a lead is a lead. You've got to learn how to write a lead. If it's digital, if it's print, you've got to learn how to pull in an audience. Building a brand, ethics, history of journalism, First Amendment issues, interviewing skills, fact-checking, using resources to create content. Okay, so all of that is kind of an immersive building block. Then all the types of content that exist, whether it's, you've all mentioned like features, graphics, database journalism, we haven't mentioned, but that's huge now. Going in there and digging through data to build a story. And especially with computer-aided technology, that's huge right now. So crisis communication. If you want to go into communication, there's also crisis communication, which is big money. And TV shows like Scandal and How to Kill a Murderer or whatever else, all those shows are generating a real interest in crisis communication. So it's going to be around in PR, government, then watchdog, public resource journalism, customized content, sports and broadcast, blah, blah, blah. All the different types of content, then teaching them how to deliver it across all the platforms, whether it's video, mobile, print, social, digital, broadcast, B2B, B2C, all those different ways. And then back to the outcomes, and that's media law, like how is this tried out over time with social media and things. You mentioned business models, like how do we pay the bills. We mentioned emerging technologies. We mentioned building an audience. You've done all this, but how do you build an audience? And I think that's kind of what we're saying. And then labs, like in this part, where you're actually doing the hands-on labs throughout the whole process. So I just think visually, that's what we're saying. Now you may draw it differently, but these are all the kind of things we're all talking about. We're talking about creation of content, delivering across platforms, and then what are the outcomes gonna be? And I know I'm very visual and it's weird, but it just, to me, that's the best.
But you did a good job explaining it. Yeah.
So I just.
What's the little bottom corner of USA Today? That's a snapshot.
Yeah, it's not a charticle. It's a charticle. But that's something they've got to learn. How to do a charticle now. Because look at how many times on Facebook you look at a chart and it pulls you in. It's the graphic. It's a Snapchat. You know, people send you a charticle because they don't want to send you a whole story.
Can I just support what he just said? That was really important about that database journalism. And it's missing. Well, I know at a lot of the HBCUs I went to, you know, that was something that was kind of missing, even when they had a lot of other good stuff going on. And it is really something where you can have the people that can decipher, you know, computer-based data of, you know, just. Reams and reams of stuff that can be condensed and deciphered and tell great stories.
Right.
It's good stuff.
We don't want to get ahead of ourselves there, because yeah, just in terms of what, I think that's, well, first of all, you're absolutely right. And the data stuff is something we definitely,
It's really
I think we ought to be teaching it, but what we're supposed to be talking about now is the vision.
Of what the school.
Yes.
So I have a question for the educators in the room, because what I'm hearing, I think, is the assumption that the stuff in that first column is being taught in journalism education today. It's you know, it's the digital skills and the tools that kids are lacking. But like, we get interns who have like way more Twitter followers than I have. You know, my little brother has a Medium blog about like why he loves LeBron, right? So young people today, you know, it seems like they have those skills. But like what I can't get my interns to do is look past like page 2 on Google, right? Or how to figure out how to find a phone number. And is it that reporting and reviewing is being taught differently now, or is the focus on the digital?
It's focus they do after they go to school. They're texting all the time. So they don't have patience. And they do this texting because they don't pay attention to grammar either.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, but that's the other part of that. What I'm learning about them is we have to understand clearly they're coming with a set of skills. We are training them ourselves. When you can have a kid, I've got a 3-year-old nephew who can navigate my phone better than I can. I mean, it just kind of goes through and he knows what he's looking for. And then the world ceases to exist for him when he starts to find it. And when we talk, I said earlier that the library is no longer the way it used to be, but the library is here now. And so they will learn some stuff you just learn because you get bitten. If you come in and I give you an assignment and you take the first hit you get, the first website you go to, and you take that information and come to me, and then I know a little bit more, and I say, wait a minute, where'd you get that stuff from? And then they go back and say, well, I pulled it up on. No, you didn't do any of it. So that's how you teach. They will get a B on that or a D on that, and then the next time they come back, they'll know to move further. So some of the skills they just have. They can outwork me in my class on this any day of the week. So we are going to teach some of the same things. What we have to grapple with, as I hear you all talk about it, and as I've seen first place, is how do we get them then every day to use those platforms that they use other than as social, because that's the way they use them. They use them as social media. We've got to now teach them that they are actually journalism. They will define journalism. You define it for yourself, I define it for myself, they define it. We all can define it differently. But what we do in teaching is to take what they have now, because I can't teach the way I taught 10 years ago, because I've got other teaching aids.
Yeah.
I call it an aid, and I might be being really arrogant there, but I call it a teaching aid. And how we then get them to do it every day. I'm thinking, I'll pull with Magic Johnson. Magic was on campus. we need to have students who, and we've got people every day who are running through, that's what I love about education, people are here every day. We need to have students who are sitting in the classroom, in my intro to mass communications class. And when I'm talking about, the history of mass communications, we need to go out and have students who can go out and interview. So I need to have people at the Clarion Ledger who will allow me to send a student down to interview somebody who is a reporter there, who can talk to them about what I've done for 30 years, okay? And then that student come back within the same time frame. You talk about labs. Laboratories and classes, universities that use them, usually say you come in from 1 to 5. And you do a multitude of things. So that the 1 hour or the 1 hour and 20-minute course can no longer suffice in a world where you have students who can go out and get it. We had Kevin Perez came in and said he went to, and I know I'm jumping around, but I'm trying to show you what the classroom needs to look like. Kevin Perez says he left here last Saturday, went to North Mississippi where a police chief died in a very violent accident. He got there, he works for APT, as a camera person, got there and had this really expensive camera system that he forgot batteries with, and the batteries had run down. He didn't panic. He said he pulled his phone and shot the video, and it went on television. Because these devices are going to be, are in many ways the equivalent of a $6,000 or $30,000 piece of camera equipment. And they're much easier. They already know how to do that. Videolicious teaches them how to take that and use it in that way. I don't think we're gonna lose the fundamentals if you are doing laboratory.
Let me ask this question. And before I do that, did your question get answered?
I think so.
Okay, all right, good. So in terms of, guess what, again, going back to shaping the vision and all of this, when you talk about this, excuse me, when I think about, again, I'm trying to stay away from the traditional definition of what's known as news, okay? But when you talk about teaching students how to recognize stuff that's interesting, okay, and stuff that people mention, it actually seems to me that they can teach us what's interesting and what we ought to be. You know what I'm saying? Because we can have, just using the traditional definition of, you know, think about news bags, you know, all this, okay, timeless, all this stuff, okay. We can do all that and write a story that fits that definition, Pearl, that nobody read but us and the guy that edited it. You know what I'm saying?
But there are elements that still need to be there, or else it's just stuff. It's just gibberish. I mean, there are elements still of those basic principles. Not all of them. A lot of it is, but there are elements that still need to be, otherwise it's what we're complaining about. Unverified, inaccurate stuff that is just put out there for entertainment. I'm just saying.
Isn't that part?
Or content creation. So I mean, man bites dog is still news, but it's only news now if you get it on video. So it can go viral so people see it.
Are we talking about wire aperture than news? I think I guess that is a fundamental question. Are we talking about the news and creating and protecting it for the state and so on and so forth, or are we talking about having the tools necessary to build content, whether you apply to news,
Well, that's where I want to bring it
your
back.
LeBron love, or whatever else?
I think
That's where I want to bring it back to,
Yeah,
because when you're talking about journalism, you're talking about, and I know I'm talking to a room full of journalists, a sort of narrow picture. Okay, and we got 1 million people here that we have to educate, and they're not all going to be journalists.
Right.
And I know that this may be a terrible thing to say to journalists, but there's a whole lot of content out there. Somebody's making that content.
Right.
Somebody's got to get in that game, people. They can't all just be looking for the truth in the news. Somebody's got to be responsible for generating that content, and we owe it to ourselves to teach them how to do that too. So what are those other areas?
Or provide a space where they can
learn.
Right.
Right.
Because to another point, like, is it instruction or is it
Provides
a
us with what to
sandbox
do.
that has all the right tools in it, and the right prompts in it, and the right incentives in it, so that they can practically
And I like
apply, which
that.
is
Well,
what
I think
about-
that's the
I like about-
$64,000 question.
I think Jason's, I think what you're asking for is a 30,000 foot looking down version of what the vision is, and he's provided in profile. But I think that's pretty close to what, if I were building a Center for Multimedia Excellence, that's the name I want to put on the, that is kind of how I would design it, right? You have foundations, you have slots, and those slots have different outcomes. The outcomes, however, have to be evaluated against some kind of objective criteria, right? And so, the one thing I would add to that is a renewed emphasis. I mean, you're calling it platforms, so I get that. I would call it deployment. And the difference I see is that no matter what shape your content takes, no matter how great your content is, somebody's going to recap it. If that person happens to have a more direct delivery device to an end audience user than you do, you're going to lose whatever you were hoping to get, right? You might get, and this is especially why young people have to understand the business of media, right? Because they'll say, oh, my story was picked up. Because they're thinking like an ad person, right? Oh, my story got picked up. My name's everywhere. The thing I broke it's a big thing. It's a big deal, right? But in the old days, when your story went national, right, and you got this big career boost out of it, in the old days, there was one source for that story, right? And now Nick Denton and his army of gawker ears are gonna recap your thing, give it a better headline, put some better art with it, put it on Facebook, put it on Tumblr, put it on wherever else, and the end audience is gonna get it from them. And however they're monetizing, they're gonna monetize, right? And so, again, no matter where you are in this business, I think it would be, protecting the fourth estate is one thing. If you're really serious about that, you're gonna teach young people how to actually protect the fourth estate and how to protect those values by creating, I don't care what it is, paywalls, some other, I can't remember who exactly mentioned and triggered this thought. The demand side, I can speak for the demand side. Maybe I can't remember everybody's. I pay for all this, and I represent those people that pay for it all.
It all meaning content?
Yeah, right? The part of the problem is we're not satisfied with banner ads anymore. And banner ads were a major protective asset to this business because they were the last bastion of, I'm willing to pay for the audience and I'll pay for them over here, right? I just want to show up to them. You do whatever you're doing to keep bringing that audience. Now, nobody on my side of the table is satisfied with that. We want to be in the content. We want to be the star. We don't want to be an extra, right? We don't want to just be on screen. We want to be what everybody's talking about. All these brands are starting to get into recycling other people's content. I work on a brand right now. They want to be, they make loans for millennials, like really low interest loans, all data backed, everything. And they want to become the source of financial news for an entire generation. Where do you think they're going to get that? They're not going to staff that. They're going to rip that from your headlines, and they're going to build that audience themselves, right? And so when they have that aspiration, we're going to PSFK, we're going to all these different, you're going to Vice and Gawker and all these different people to say, hey, how do I get into content? How does your newsroom become my asset so that I can influence people to get my loans, buy my Sprite, whatever it is? And as that happens, as that line, that church estate line evaporates and native content placement and all that becomes ever more present, it is these kids that are gonna have to defend the time it takes to actually get to page 2, the time it takes to actually go to the prosecutor's bar after hours, right? The man hours that it takes to execute the highest versions of journalism. I think if you're not educating them to the fiscal outcomes of what it is that they're doing, you're missing. And so I would rename that deployment. It's not just about getting the story to travel. It's not just about getting the news to travel. It's about getting the news to travel in a certain way so that the person that you work for will employ you next month.
Right.
We all gotta
Should
figure
that
it
be a
out.
part of, okay, so where does that fit in terms of, you basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're talking about monetizing content. Okay.
I'm talking about their
I think that's a
understanding of the
valid-
business so that they're not.
Media entrepreneurship could probably fit
Yes,
into
I think
that.
so. Yeah.
Y'all might have mentioned it already, but that's one way. I know my students have been talking about it a lot because it's not just how do you tell the story, it's how do you sell the story. I don't know which Johnson it is that just made their own magazine,
Yeah.
their own YouTube channel, and now they are doing content straight to the web. And so it's like a lot of our students, they already are, imitating that model. We've got students right now who have their own YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
And they sell their content, well, I think it's through advertising a little bit, but if we as educators, or if we find the right educators to train them to do that, I think that's a model that's gonna stay alive.
And
for a
more of them are
while.
gonna find that, for the same reason your cousin found his success with his blog, right? Like, they're seeing on Instagram, there was a story the other day, this girl quit her job as a kindergarten teacher to twerk for Vine. That's her job now. People pay her to twerk online, she makes $200K a year twerking online, right?
Must be so proud.
In their new house.
I think
Obviously, nobody wants to teach that, but the fact that that exists as a model
Exactly.
licenses a lot of other things to happen.
Yeah, how else
It's
But
not
that's,
something-
but that's content and not the, I think, what the tenets of journalism and
Maybe.
Absolutely.
foundation that we're talking about.
Right.
I think the knights of traditional journalism have to lay their swords down a little bit and understand that content drives our business now at the professional.
That's
And
why
it would
I'm
be
saying
irresponsible for us to
Content is king.
That door
expect
has just
students to
not
come and
closed.
learn a traditional way and I don't mean not learn, but I'm saying to expect them to come and learn a traditional way to do something that they'll never be asked to do when they leave here.
Right.
And that's where we have to be careful, like, to me, the door needs to be open to the Clarence Ledger, the Advocate, and all these local, the television stations. Those pathways have to be back and forth for the students to understand how it's done at the professional level. The reason I say it is because whatever y'all are doing at the Clarence Ledger, the Advocate changes 5 times faster than it's gonna change for the students because of
And
whatever
10
board
times
you have to
faster
go
than
to.
the faculty.
Exactly. I remember when Ernest put in we had the new computers to Clarence Ledger. And since I was like the youngest dude in the one of the youngest people in the newsroom, they asked me to go teach some of the older, staffers like how to use these Macs. And we had guys taking the mouse and picking it up and sticking it on the screen. So to assume that the professionals all know how to do it and are up to speed is probably not smart either. Like, but if you're working with it, if the department is working in conjunction with all of these broadcast outlets, news, television, print, whatever it is, digital, then you at least give yourself a chance to be on that evolving track of how things are done. Because 7 years ago, did your staffers have, the people who worked at your newspapers, did they have Twitter accounts? Exactly. Now you have to have one that, it's like mandatory. So it can all change in a matter of 3-4 years for everybody, the entire industry, in terms of how we're doing business.
Yeah, I think, just to clarify the point, you can't teach people how to twerk, that's not the thing. I think the point is you have to show the full spectrum of the way this business works for people to understand what their role is gonna be.
That's what I like that.
Right?
Yeah. And I think, and you're right there, I guess, just in terms of the mission and vision. My question simply was, where does that fit in? The business side, where does that fit in? Because when you, in the traditional sense, old school, we didn't talk a lot about the business side.
Right.
And it really, in some ways, it handicapped a lot of people because all they're concerned about is, in this business, you got people that's driven by ego, you got people that's driven by money. And now, in terms of that person you was talking about, just all he cares about is that fact that their story's out there and that's why people look at it, but they made zero dollars off of it. Or, and I think your point too is also great about what am I doing for my company, you know, just in terms of the corporate stuff. So I was just wondering, I mean, should we put, you know, the business, should that be a part of the vision? Or because again,
I think so.
The business of media, I think, needs to be a part of that intro, a part of that intro, and it needs to be a realistic look at it. If you work for a publication, for example, that has themed editions, and they're trying to get ads for that edition, you will be asked to produce content, I was gonna say write stories, produce content around that theme. And the content that you produce, by the way, cannot insult or upset any of those people who will be advertising in that edition.
See,
I mean,
to me, that's public relations, and that's what I would tell my boss. I mean, you know, that's public relations.
Oh no, I agree with that, and we used to not. I mean, that used to be, you know, there was a separation of church and state that was inviolate, but today the reality, try that.
You have to work with everybody. Like the marketing people, the social media department.
Right.
If you work at a big enough publication, you have to be able to work across all those lines.
You will.
You have to.
And
You have to.
and that's something, and here's the, you're right. So I like that because again, the days when you can write a story, or you can write a column, mimicking the paper's largest advertising.
Those days are.
How
long have they been? Try that.
But now, I don't agree with that.
Surprise, surprise.
Because, I mean, I think in a heartbeat, I mean, if I look back at where I was at least, we attacked our largest advertisers a lot if they were doing what was wrong. And, or if they were, you know, we would challenge them editorially. I mean, hell, the city of Chattanooga was one of my largest advertisers, and they got attacked regularly.
I'm not saying not holding accountable. I'm saying making fun of them. Okay, and let me give you
But I think that's another issue, and I know this will probably rub some people the wrong way, but I'm not sure everybody wants to know our opinion anymore. I mean, I'm not sure.
If they want your opinion, they'll give it to you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they don't want me to write a commentary necessarily anymore. I think it's some of the biggest criticism we receive is, you know, we represent a small group of people, and we're writing commentary about things that people, you know, this is one man's opinion, but yet it's portrayed like an institution's opinion, and it's not always an institution's opinion.
Well, I know a little bit about that. I think that, let me speak to that. I think that what my experience has been and what people get offended by, and particularly in this case, present company included, is people's opinion that's not well researched, not well documented. People don't know what they're talking about and trying to pass themselves off as experts. That's what's offensive, and that's what people get pissed off about. I will tell you that, based on my experience, there's a huge market for opinions and personalities that are well documented, well researched, and well thought out. What you're talking about, people are giving pushback on somebody, and I'll be real graphic, that lives in Madison that wants to write an opinion about Jackson.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, that's what you're talking. That's what, and on that line, and I give you another example. We talk about this whole thing about content. And this is from me. What I'm talking, and this kind of goes into news judgment, news value, but it also talks about credibility and opinion. You know, I think that, well, maybe it's not the place for it, but I think it does need to have, we need to talk about, particularly from a business side, okay? When we're, what we write and how we write affects business, okay? And one example is this, I would use this example, like Magic Johnson was on Jackson State's campus Tuesday. There was a story in a local paper on Wednesday that did not reflect his visit, okay? The reporter chose to take something that Magic said a decade ago, make it a part of this story, that ended up basically questioning Magic's credibility. Okay, now that story did not reflect what he did when he was here. Okay, and the way people responded. People don't want to hear about that. People wanted to hear about what they saw when he walked around and the way that he responded to that. And again, I think, again, it's a little bit opposite, but in terms of, and I'm talking strictly journalism, in terms of what we're giving people, how we're giving it, I mean, it directly affects the brand, it directly affects the bottom line, it directly affects whether it's TV, whether it's radio, whether it's newspaper, our credibility. So at some point we have to talk about that. But I just,
and people have lost advertising. I mean, it's unrealistic to say, okay, it doesn't matter about offending advertisers or anything like that, because there have been publications that have literally died because they lost advertisers who got mad over something and stayed mad.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times they get mad and they don't stay mad, but if they do. So, I mean, I don't think that we're necessarily putting in, but I mean, I think students and anybody learning the craft or getting into this business, and it is a business,
Yes.
needs to know that there is a financial side that is affected by the editorial side.
Right, and it's called, and that's another thing, and we'll talk about that too, and this is exactly what I was talking about, the teaching. I think it was one of the questions we sent about teaching. Should we change the way we teach ethics and responsibility and all that kind of stuff?
Well, because I think a lot of
Do ethics change?
but a lot of these young people don't know.
I think so.
A lot of young people can read a business story that is, or a story about government that's filled with opinion, and take it as fact. I've seen it over and over again. So, someone will read a column on our website by a columnist, and they're giving all these things like it's fact. Like, that's someone's opinion. That's not fact. But they attack us like it's fact, and it's an opinion piece.
Right, I get that too, but which again.
So I think we have to train young people the difference.
It goes back to,
Right.
that's where I was going.
I would venture to say if we fill this room with college students right now, and we said, read these 10 pieces, which are fact and which are opinion.
But yeah,
we'd have a hard time navigating that.
but Sekou can tell you that his professor used to hold up the newspaper and say, here's this page. When you see something on this page, here's what the expectation is. Okay, on this page, all right? My expectation on this page is different from my expectation on what I read on the editorial page.
But the difference now is we're not teaching
The difference.
them to read. Well, we're not teaching them to read this because, let's be honest,
all coming
exactly, they're not
So they
getting
don't know
it.
what
And
page
that's
it's
why,
Okay.
and that's why the content, you have to focus on the content itself, and the readers are going to determine what they take as fact. I don't care what you put out there and how it's presented. The people who read it will decide for themselves what they think it is. So you just have to be true to the gathering of it, the presentation, and what it's supposed to be. But you can't control what the audience is going to determine that they think it is.
Okay, so.
Some people think Jon Stewart, all of that,
There's plenty of people that watch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's their news, that's their news, okay?
That's been documented.
So, news is what they say it is sometimes,
Well,
I mean, Fox
well,
News,
but that's
not
not.
growing up in Fox News.
Yeah, but that's no different though. The news is I said the Clear Lake. News is what the managing editor of Clear Lake says it is. Okay.
But again, in terms of, think about the story you want to be able to tell about this place in 10 years, 15 years, right? If you produce all of the Woodwards and Bernsteins and so on and so forth, and you arrive at some kind of platinum status for being able to produce people in that mold, that's one thing. But the chances are, again, that that's only one subsection of what's going to actually attract people to this school.
And going
Right, so it's like if I want to be, who are my media heroes, right? A lot of these kids, it's not going to be a reporter. It's going to be a YouTube star.
Right.
It's not going to be and that YouTube star might be making bodily function noises, but he's caking, right? Because his bodily function noises get delivered at such frequency that all these advertisers want to ride, right? So I think being able to cover that spectrum of, if you want to be involved in the media arts, this is the place to do that, right? Here's a path that's all about journalistic integrity and ethics and this and that and the other. And if you want to be Wilbur and Bernstein, this is a place to do that.
But the big piece here though is, I misheard correctly, but the business end, whether business entrepreneurship needs to be a big part of this.
A part of, but yeah.
Yeah.
How big is up to you, but yeah, how big is up to you.
Oh, can I just say this also? As educators, what I've seen over the years is our concentrations are multimedia journalism, you probably have already heard it, and production and IMC for marketing. A lot of the students who are coming through the journalism part, they really don't want to be journalists. I hate to say it, but they'd rather be entertainment folks.
Sure.
Some of them are saying they want to go another route. And so the thing about it is, I like what you were saying, because we can't be everything to all people. But if they come through right now, we tell them that we're training them to be journalists. But I tell you, when we put them out, when they graduate, it's not always equal. And if we actually said, if you want to be a journalist, if you want to be more content and mobile app or what have you, maybe if we did make our school of journalism, you know, with various areas, it probably would be more successful, because some of them say, why do I, which is not the best thing to say, but why do I have to take research methods? You know, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. We
It's
might
gonna make them better at their job.
Yeah, oh, I do agree.
That's
but
what they don't understand.
Yeah, and I think what they need to do is maybe take it earlier, because when they're seniors, they much rather be concentrating on their craft more so than worrying about their research paper. That's what I found. And I guess if we do a little research ourselves, maybe then we'll be able to also figure out what is, you know, what, there's so many ways we could go. What do we want our school to look like too, to a degree, and that will depend on who you bring in to teach it. So I guess we have to look at what the other schools are doing in our state and then decide what's our best bet in terms of what we want our students to do. Right now, I really see the internet as that wherever it is, it's going to have to involve that and content providing. I definitely see the way our students, they figure it out. Now that they've got these, they figure it out. You know, it's not even so much backpack journalism, it's back pocket journalism or back pocket content providing. I really see that, and I guess we have to really ask our students, you know, as they're coming through, and maybe some of our alumni, you know, what do they wish that they would have had? And as they're now in the business, I guess that's you too, huh? Y'all are the graduates, you know.
Well, I think Sekou said it a few minutes ago, folks. We made the statement, is traditional journalism ready to lay its sword down? And I think that's what we got to decide going forward here. Because when I was the interviewing manager, and from my side of the table, students come in, you know, I felt that some of these students are just not ready. In my mind, was I being too critical or not? They're just not ready for the job that was at hand. And now, I actually work with a mother, and she comes into the office, you know, and she's got her earbuds in, and she's listening to the iPhone and music, and she's trying to work, and that's not professional to me. But I see that a lot. I mean, I'm looking at tattoos. You know, is this the new wave of journalism? Is this the new wave of journalists that we're going to be in the marketplace?
Yes.
So 10 years from now, we have a millennium on this side,
Right.
and one over here, so there'll be one of the same. But right now, us veterans, that's not professional. I'm sorry, it's not professional.
And it's funny because like the moment you're saying, I was like, yo, that's a uniform or something. Like those tattoos are tied to them. They're not gonna get a scoop without those tattoos, right? They're not gonna get that thing without that kind of cultural symbolism.
But I think so to me, this is where we probably differ a little bit, Ernest. I don't feel like we can get caught up in that. I mean, if that's, as long as you're skilled and you know what you're doing, I mean, you know, we have to be, this is where we have to be flexible too. I mean, we have to understand that this thing is gonna look a little different from what we used to think. I mean, and so we have to be understanding of that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a tattoo.
Well, not the tattoo. But I tell you, probably my best employee wears headphones all day.
Right.
Good job done, huh?
Exactly. But we have to teach them how, like I'm always talking to my daughter. I have a daughter who's a brilliant kid in school. I mean, straight A student. You know, she answers everything. But one of the things is, sometimes I feel like the communication part piece is missing, you know, the ability to sit down and deliver your message verbally. And like I tell her, I said, that's going to be one of your most important things. I said, because when people look at you, they'll never look at you and say, that's a smart kid, or that's a straight A student, without knowing, without you being able to articulate your message. I said, so that's important to me, that you have to be able to do that, and we have to teach these young people how to communicate right, properly, and how to deliver their message in a way that's responsible.
That's what we said the first 5 minutes of the program.
We're back to the core skills.
Yes. And that's, you know, and that's what we gotta get the kids started at. I mean, you know, we can get off into all of the other stuff eventually, but I think, you know, you gotta bring it back to, you know, how do we basically prepare them to be able to do what we need them to do, and we have to understand that they may act a little bit different than us, and we have to be fine with that.
Well, I remember when we were told it wasn't appropriate, we couldn't have dreadlocks, we couldn't have afro, we couldn't, you know, dress without piercings. Right. So we've moved along, and I think that will move along. Those things, we have to keep moving along as well. But I think what you're saying is the core skills, the communication, interpersonal, those things still remain regardless of what your attire and hairstyle.
And some of the best journalists in the world, the White House press corps, they look like freaks. They absolutely wear Birkenstocks and have their hair in ponytails. I mean, and they're sitting there interviewing the president. So I don't think it's, you know, I mean, living in Hawaii for years, I mean, those journalists dress like crazy. I mean, so, but I mean, I think Eric, to me, you're saying something different than, to me, I felt like the room was saying, you want both. You want to teach them journalism and content simultaneously, and the difference of the two.
No, I clearly get that.
Okay.
Just in terms of.
But do you?
Absolutely.
I mean, is that we'll always do that, or will there ever be a part where if they really just want to do some of the mechanical or the real techie things, would that be separate from? I'm just asking because I understand the basics of journalism and making sure that's all taught. But do you think there might be an avenue for students who are more technical and they wouldn't do the journalistic side?
I think that.
I'm just asking.
I think that's doing them a disservice.
I don't know. I'm just asking. I'm wondering for some media production areas. I'm wondering for the mobile apps and things like that.
My answer is I'm saying I think that would be doing them a disservice.
Okay.
And I think you want to send well-rounded journalists or and content providers out of these doors into the workforce where they will be
I'm just asking. I just don't.
Well, if I understand your question right, you're saying do they have to be journalists at all? You're saying send well-rounded journalists into these other things, and do I hear you asking, could they just be other things?
Yeah, I'm thinking that there is room for them to be other things. Based on the conventions that I've gone to, some of the other educators who are struggling with this when we sit in a room and we're trying to figure out what do we want people to be with a mass comm degree, I'm just wondering if the future would hold some of it wouldn't be
Well, I think
journalistic.
you missed the first part of the conversation. You missed the first part of the conversation, Professor Fridge, and I think that, and if you allow me an opportunity to respond, what I was about to say was that the way that I was framing the whole question is I think that in terms of creating an educational unit for communication, you can call it journalism, you can call it whatever, you're gonna have to teach. You can't just focus on teaching journalism. Okay. That would be stupid. You gotta be able to, because again, what I always spoke to your class yesterday, and I said that you talk about just from preparing students for the workforce, okay, there will always be a market skill sets that we're teaching. Whether you go to a newspaper, or you go to Macy's and work on this website, where you go to, there'll always be a skill set for people who can, as you're saying, collect content, whether it's video, whether it's audio, or just whatever. I mean, so to say to students, yeah, we know that, but we want you to be journalists, I think you don't want to say it. And which is what I like what you were saying, Terrence, earlier on about the name, and even narrating, even more so than that. So we're not, and we've even the data and I, even with the administration, in terms of first rolling this out about doing something different. You heard me as a card-carrying journalist. You heard me say that we can't be focused narrowly on journalism. I mean, so yeah. I mean, that's we get that.
But I think on the other hand, what does come up in reality, and I keep going back to what's realistic about some of these things, is that at a lot of universities, and I write about higher ed, I write about HBCUs, filling the seats, FTE, whatever they're going to call it next, graduation rates, the reality, the bottom line, driven by money and the need to exist, is that you have to fill the seats.
Right.
So you're going to have students in your new school of whatever you decide to call it, or in your present department of mass communications. You are going to have students, and they may be in the majority, who are not going to be mass communicators or journalists. They're there because somebody got them there, they got financial aid, whatever they got, to fill the seats. Or in many cases, they started out somewhere else, maybe in the physical sciences, couldn't pass the test, and came over to your department.
And that's and thank you for saying that, because girl, that is a reality.
Right.
It's certainly a reality.
So I'm just being realistic. So they're going to tell you, why do I have to take this course? Because I have no intention, or I'm not going to do this. But then you decide, what do you do with those students? Because you can't tell them, get out of the seat, because we need you in the seat. So what do you do with those students? And I think that's the crux of what you're
and let me just say it too. And again, the dean mentioned this in our opening remarks. And again, we've talked a lot about cutbacks in business and all that for the media and the communications industry. But I just want to say again, just like she said, that we face some of the same financial pressures that everybody else does.
Right.
So, and we do have to operate within that. So.
And one of our financial pressures, which matters how we configure this, is that when it comes to funding for the college, you get funding based on where students declare when they come in as first-time freshmen. So if they come into a STEM field and fail out and end up over in Mass Comm or English, usually, you don't get any money for them. And now you got 45 people in the class. You got to teach them. You don't get any money for them. So you're like teaching for free with no resources, because if they don't declare your major coming in the door, at least here in Mississippi, you do not get the funding that follows them. And now I'm saying it's going to be tied to their graduation rate. So they have to start with you, they have to come through the pipeline, they have to graduate in order for you to get the funding in the department to keep that thing rolling. And so it matters what the curriculum is. It matters that it's marketable, that it's sexy, that somebody wants to take it.
Right.
That's where the opportunity lies.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it
what
really
Josh was
is.
talking about. These same principles
is.
apply to all of these different things he's talking about. That's what makes this field far more diverse than studying business or something like that. This can be the one that leads you down a million different paths.
Well, I agree, but we have to figure out now. We have to figure out how to get them to understand that at the outset, because the way it's configured now, there's like, well, why do I have to take my
Well, I mean,
my
you do have a college full of mass communicators, so put them to work, right? I mean, that's part of it, right? When you're talking about establishing a brand, when you're talking about making it marketable, when you're talking about making it attractive, I think, you kind of cast down your buckets where you are, in one respect, right? Like, how does that task itself become an objective for the college in the near term, so that those seats are filled as people are coming in? What is the big affiliate program that goes on?
And in other terms, that's where this department has to breathe life
into different areas for the students. Like, they can't come in and the only outlet so you can write for the blue and white flash.
Right.
Or you guess. I mean, in this digital age, there should be tons of outlets for them to create projects in whatever avenue that they might be interested in, whether it's broadcast, podcasts, whatever, you know. You can do a million different things, but it has to be born out of the department. So there's that resource and that give and take. You can't just leave it to their own devices on campus and say, come to class, take notes, this, that, and the other, and then go away. It's like the department has to have an open door with creative ways for them to, whatever their interest might be, they should be able to realize it in this department.
And I think you spoke to this earlier, and I think, Sally, you mentioned it too. I think those teachings and those offerings have to happen early on.
Yes.
And not when they become a senior.
Yeah.
It has to happen early
That's the thought that I
on
was-
to keep them engaged.
But that's the classroom, that's what I keep talking about. You gotta let them do it, as opposed to just talking about it. And so the structure of how we made structure classes different in terms of, because people are, it's not, for me, it's not gonna be anything new that somebody comes in on the front end thinking they wanna do this, and then by the time they get to be a sophomore, they go, I don't really wanna do that. What you have to do is let them know, if you're a freshman coming in and saying that, and then you get exposed to it in your freshman year,
Right.
all of it.
Well,
Then by the time you're a sophomore, you can still major in, okay, I came in wanting to do broadcast, now I think I wanna do journalism. And so we can move you into journalism because we've had kind of like, you know, in some schools they do it almost like the first year is just a year of immersing you into that area and what it is.
that's great, and I really hear what you're saying, Secretary. And one of the thoughts is, as we prepare to break for lunch is, I love the idea about the introductory class, great some excitement. And even if you can't get into your real stuff early, that class, what I've proposed doing is having some workshops for students and faculty, first year. So even before you actually enroll in the class, you can pick up some skills that you can walk down the hall and apply at the TV station, or the radio station, or the blue and white flash, or come over to University Communications. I think that's critical. I mean, like somebody said, getting that excitement and not just telling them about it, but okay, we're gonna tell you about it, then we're gonna train you to do it, even before you get into the formal process. So, just one thought. But anyway,
That's a good thought.
It's lunchtime.
Wait, before you break for lunch, though, because lunch isn't here. It is lunchtime. Okay, but what I want us to do before you have lunch is to walk over to Innovate real quickly. It's right here in the library, so we go out downstairs, go out to the main building. I want you to see that, and by the time we get back, lunch will be here, Ms. Harper. I don't know if you all met Ms. Harper here, you probably have been dealing with her over these many months. This is my right hand, and that makes all things possible. Ms. Harper, stand up so they can see. Good afternoon. Are you back? Thank you. Ms. Harper makes it all happen. Hey, you too. Very nice. You can leave whatever you need.
It's good to hear these conversations, because we really are at a good point where we need to move forward with some great ideas. Whether it's new, what is
I see it just like how I do when you try it like this.
All right.
Mrs. Stringfellow.
Just have to
figure out
You teach at mass communication? You're in that job?
Visiting professor, or visiting assistant professor, or master.
It's a good thing we didn't plan lunch yesterday.
At least a bunch of them.
Oh, really?
Harper,
Did you all pause this? Wow. I saw y'all all.
Yes,
I saw everybody.
You saying that?
Oh, yeah.
multi-skill.
Really? Oh, boy. My goodness. That's a lot.
Yeah. kids love to go look out for them. They think it's the greatest thing ever. They hate the Atlanta Aquarium.
Probably need to get Brandon to come and stop it.
I know, I love the last night.
You down there working? He probably going in a lot of different directions.
You sit.
That's a good time.
You know the Jackson.
But